likes to make people talk to her.
I hereby call the meeting of the Brockton City Council Finance Committee for Monday, September 21st, 2020, 7 p.m. to order. All city council meetings are held in accordance with COVID-19 state guidelines. Councilors, before we begin our agenda this evening, I would like to take a moment to remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice who changed our country with her advocacy for women's rights and gender equality. Please join me in a moment of silence in memory of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg. Amen. May she rest in eternal peace.
Amen.
Madam Clerk, agenda item number 1.
Appointment of Paul Studinsky of 48 Carlisle Street, Brockton, Mass. 02302, from an alternate to a full member of the Licensing Commission for a 3-year term, ending February 2023. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee Paul F. Studinsky.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I take great honor in putting this forward. As you know, Councilor Studinsky served here, esteemed member of this body, also was a police chief, and it's okay. And he had accepted my. Pick up the phone. Hope wants to talk to you, sweetheart. That's all right. He accepted my offer at that time to be an alternate, and since that time, as you know, a member has resigned. Mr. Marion has resigned. So I had asked Councilor Studinsky if he would be willing to step up, and he proudly said, absolutely, Brockton is home. So, Councilor, thank you. He's here tonight. Thank you.
Councilor, would you like to come up?
Sure.
You're not a stranger to these chambers.
Good evening, Madam President,
Good evening.
members of the Finance Committee, Council. I have some familiarity with the way we operate here, so I'm going to just let you ask me any questions you might have of me.
Councilor Cruz.
I just want to say it's about time that a member of the council cords was put onto this august body, so if there are no other questions, I make a motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably to the full city council. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full council.
All Madam and Council,
Thank you. Madam Clerk, number 2.
Appointment of retired police officer Charles Cassiani, Jr. as a special police officer. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee Charles Cassiani, Jr.
Madam Chairwoman, I just want to say there is no truth to the fact that Councilor Studinsky will open up every single license commission playing a harmonica. That is a vicious rumor. I just want to put that into the record. What's before you right now, we pay great respect of retired Brockton police officers. Of course, Councilor Falwell is one of those individuals. So this is an opportunity to be able to bring them back as specials to help specifically on details and the like. So the matter's before you.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The appointment carries favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 3.
Appointment of Hank Tartaglia of 33 Brook Street, Brockton, Mass. 02301, to the Licensing Commission for a 3-year term, ending September 2023. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee Hank Tartaglia, License Commission.
Good evening. Mr. Tartaglia has served this city very well as a member of the License Commission. He was appointed by previous mayor. His term has expired. I'm putting him forward for potential consideration of reappointment. He is here to answer any questions this evening. Thank you.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The appointment carries favorably back to the full city council. Thank you for being here this evening, Mr. Tartaglia.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, number 4.
Reappointment of David Santos as a Weights and Measures agent in the City of Brockton for a 1-year term, ending September 2021. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee David Santos.
What is before you, ladies and gentlemen, is just a reappointment. Police chief has asked me to consider this. I strongly recommend that the reappointment go forward.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The reappointment carries favorably back to the full city council. Thank you. Madam Clerk, number 5.
Order, appropriation of $2,625 from Last Call Foundation COVID-19 Decontamination Grant to Fire Department, Last Call Foundation COVID-19 Decontamination Grant. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, our designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Michael Williams, Chief of Fire.
Thank you, Troy, and I'd just like to announce that Chief Williams did contact me and to let me know that Deputy Chief Joe Solomon is here. He is the one who secured the grant. He is here if anybody has any questions for him. Thank you. Troy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Happy to defer to Deputy Chief Solomon. I did send you an email late this afternoon with a description of several of these items. The Last Call Foundation is a nonprofit organization that was created in the wake of the death of firefighter Michael Kennedy, and this is a grant from that foundation for the purposes as stated.
Motion to recommend favorably. Second.
On the, Counselor Nacastro?
Thank you. Good evening, Chief Williams and Mr. Clarkson. I just wanted to say I did a little bit of research into this Last Call Foundation. How fortunate we are that they're giving us this grant for decontaminating firehouses in Brockton. I see that the purpose of this foundation is to identify and address unique challenges facing firefighters to enhance their ability to safely and effectively fight fires and protect the public. I think this is a wonderful grant. We're very fortunate to be receiving it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. A motion was made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The order moves favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 7.
6.
Oh, 6, sorry.
Order, appropriation of $74,624 from Plymouth County U.S. Department of Justice Fiscal Year 19 Justice Assistance Grant, JAG Award, to Police Department Fiscal Year 19 Justice Assistance Grant, JAG Award. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Mr. Clarkson?
Madam Chairman, as you can see, Chief Gomes is here in the audience. I did also provide you with a link to a description of the Justice Assistant Grant Award. As you know, this is a grant that the city receives on a regular basis.
Any questions, councilors? Counselor Cardoso had a...
Hi, Troy. Thank you. I just have a quick comment. The grant seems to be more allocated to tasers and non-lethal weapons than there is allocated to trauma-certified social workers. And I'm all for grants that help in violence prevention, but I would just, ask that when we write for these grants to consider, putting in more for trauma-informed, trauma-certified social workers, which is a huge problem in our city, than, non-lethal weapons.
I'll
Thank
certainly
you.
take note of that, Counselor, and obviously the chief is here as well.
Counselor Cruz, are you all set, Counselor Cardoso?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Cruz?
Just a quick question. Is this about in line with what we received most years in this? Do you know?
That's a good question, Counselor. I do not know, but I'll gladly check on that for you.
If you can, just let us know.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam
Counselor
Chairman.
Nacastro?
Thank you. I note in reviewing the information that the total grant was for just about $104,000 to Plymouth County. And of that, Brockton is getting the lion's share, which of course is this evening's amount, $74,624. Wareham is getting a little bit and Plymouth is getting a little bit. And we're primarily using it for tasers and accessories for them to replace obsolete models, and also for clinician hours, community policing, and to send some children to summer camp run by the Plymouth County DA. I think it's a terrific grant. How fortunate we are to receive it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Thompson?
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson. I don't know if this would be better directed to Chief Gomes. But Chief, reading through this, I understand there's a desire to make sure that every Brockton police officer has a taser on them when they're out on patrol. The question is, what's the current number of tasers that we have right now, and how many more would we need to accomplish the stated goal?
Right now, we have less than 20 tasers for the entire patrol division. Those tasers are quickly coming to the end of their shelf life. There is a 5-year shelf life on tasers through the taser company, so we, not to incur any liability, we have to take those offline once they reach that. Through this grant, we're going to be able to have more and have more backups. They are tested every day in between shifts, and when they're malfunctioning, they have to be taken offline for everyone's safety. So this is just going to put a bank of them there for the officers going out on patrol, the uniform division.
Now, with the taser, is each police officer assigned a specific one, or are there just a group there that they take off the shelf when they come on to duty?
The latter is correct. Okay. There's a bank of them. We don't have enough with the costs per officer and to have replacements. So we want to have a bank that there's an ample supply for the shift to take them and the supervisors. And but they are shared shift to shift, and they're tested in between shifts.
And would 25 tasers plus whatever we have in reserve from previous purchases, is that enough for each shift going out?
I think it's going to get us by this year, and we're hoping that through further grants and through other means that we can replenish some more. Again, next year, some will be coming offline. The small amount that we have, some are relatively new and some are 4 years old, right, or some are 5 years old, so they're going to be cycling in and out. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise the number, but we're trying to do it at no cost to the city and trying to acquire these through grants.
Now, and one last, how often do the officers receive training on the tasers? Is that a one-time thing, or are they constantly being trained on that?
The officers have to be certified yearly on tasers, and they're not allowed to take them or use them and take them out in the field until they receive the very basic, longer introduction course.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much, Chief.
All set, councilors?
I am.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 7.
Ordered, appropriation of $535,153 from Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, State 911 Department, fiscal year 2021, Public Safety Answering Point and Regional Emergency Communications Center support and incentive grants. To Police Department, fiscal year 2021, Public Safety Answering Point and Regional Emergency Communications Center support and initiative grant fund. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is also an annual grant from the State 911 Department to help defray the costs, both personnel costs and at times capital costs for the operation of our 911 system. Every community in the Commonwealth receives these grants on a proportional basis, and this is the allocation for the City of Brockton.
Any questions, councilors?
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Councilor Nacastro?
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to take an item out of order. I'd like to take item number 14 now. Someone will second it?
Second.
A motion's been made to take number 14 out of order, and it's been properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Thank you.
14 is taken out of order. Madam Clerk, please read number 14.
Resolve The mayor, the chief of police, and the appropriate member of the law department be invited to a committee of the city council to discuss the lawful options and strategies to address the continuing problem and complaints from residents. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Emmanuel Gomes, chief of police, Megan Bridges, city solicitor.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I don't believe Attorney Bridges is here yet, but I can give you an update, and I know Police Chief Gomes is here to give detailed information as well. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start with parties? Do we want to talk about the illegal ATV mopeds that are driving around the city of Brockton? Two quality of life issues, two illegal actions. I know when we've been here before, we've indicated, myself and the chief have indicated what the efforts are being done right now. I won't speak for the chief relative to increased traffic activities. He's going to share that with you tonight, but rest assured that we are definitely doing that. Any options that we can do, we will do, out of abundance of caution and safety for the general welfare of the citizens that we all represent. In terms of the parties, if Dr. Herman was here right now, he would actually say that the curfew has made a difference. That is why we're in yellow. I won't speak for Rick, but he has said that as a school committee member, and I know he would opine that here as well. So the curfew is still in effect. The three playgrounds that are the habitual problem locations as well for outdoor activities and parties and beer parties and the like, the curfew is on that. They close daily at 4 p.m. That's the Nelson at South Middle School. That's Edgar Playground down on Dover and Winthrop, and it's what I call the Ash Street, but it's technically the Bent Playground. So, Chief, I know you and I spoke before we came here, and you have some information you wanted to share as well.
Good evening. Speaking about these house parties that we've all been hearing about, I'm happy to tell you that they've dissipated a little bit, but we continue to face these things on a regular basis. A couple weekends back, we had as many as 20 on the board at one time on a Saturday night to deal with, 20 house parties. The house parties take on a life of their own. If they're happening in a commercial location, we tend to act quicker and swifter than if we're dealing in a personal dwelling. We have different constitutional issues there. But some of the calls that we've been getting at some of these residential places are things like social distancing, not wearing masks, and sometimes we're finding ourselves in some neighborhood disputes, if you can understand. But the commercial places, that's strictly set out for that, and specifically set out, they sell admission. Yesterday we had one where we quickly acted on it, and during daylight hours, as soon as it started, we went, Brockton officers quickly, and detectives quickly put an end to it. They seized about 6 pounds of marijuana and a cachet of illegal alcohol that was going to be sold at that location. Already at the get-go, there was 200 people there. They were quickly moved out, and the party ended. We seized that. And the reason why I say that's different than a residential is because the person that was hosting this has a home address out of Hartford, Connecticut. Okay? So these are distance things versus sometimes a family party that gets a little too big in a residential area. That's why I mentioned the two types, because they cannot be seen in the same light. We're also dealing with some issues at licensed establishments. The mayor didn't touch on it, but I'd like you to know that we have officers that are licensed agents, and they will be out there and have been out there, but they're checking on a curfew and checking that bars are acting appropriately according to the governor's order, and that there's no backdoor after-hours activity, as we've seen in some places. So the officers are dealing with those commercial establishments and some of these other things. We have been seeing they're dissipating a little bit, and some people really are cooperative. When we ask them to cease and desist and to end the party, they do. We have some that we have to continuously go back to. Last time I was here, I explained to you that we put in different protocols where a ranking officer will go if it continues to be a nuisance. We continue to do that. We document it. We send a ranking officer. And I want to tell you that as of today, I checked today, we have 8 city residents that are going to find themselves in court over not ending a party. 8 complaints have issued to this day on these types of parties that we discussed here. And those were obviously of the larger magnitude that required several cruisers. Some of these parties that require the whole shift. The whole shift gets tied up in clearing out a couple hundred people, especially if it's confrontational. So I wanted to just give you an update on what's going on that, but we will stay on it, and we're hoping that it continues to dissipate somewhat.
Counselor Fowler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief and Mr. Mayor and Solicitor Bridges. I filed this, and it was shortly after you had provided a synopsis of what was going on in the city. With respect to the ATVs and the motorbikes, I do share your opinion and your policy that we don't want to chase a young kid and have a vehicle go out of control and the rider gets killed. But now I'm getting concerned that we can't have an open season here where a pedestrian can get hurt. That's number one.
Correct.
And let me say, I know we reduced the police overtime budget, and I think we did the right thing because I like to see justification for spending. But if, in the wisdom of you and the mayor, you need to come back and ask for money dedicated for a particular purpose, enforcement of laws, rules, and regulations about ATVs and recreational vehicles, I, for one, would not have a problem with that. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I think that would be money well spent. Let me also say that, and it was very different when I was on the department with you, 99% of the public support the police. There is that 1% that hopes that you will make a mistake and we can catch it on an iPhone and we can make a big deal about it and we can demonstrate. None of us supports police who abuse people or take away civil liberties or God forbid, kill someone. But it's a tough job, and I know the officers must have in the back of their mind concern about, well, what can I really do without putting myself at risk? And that's why I included the city solicitor in this. I thought it might be helpful, if it hasn't been done, to present some type of a training bulletin for all of the officers to read saying, if you fall within the scope of this training bulletin, based on case law, based on what we know about the laws of the Commonwealth, you will be okay. In other words, give them a little reassurance so that when the men and women go out there, they know that, okay, we've got a policy, we can do this, and if we stay within these parameters, we're not going to put ourselves at risk or our family at risk with a civil lawsuit. I just think they need a little bit of support in terms of a document from the city or a training bulletin that really spells out for them, yeah, you can do this. If you run into this fact pattern and you make these observations, this is what the law allows you to do. You can't do this, but you can do this. And I just would like to give them a little backup because the job is getting so much more difficult.
Well, thank you, Councilor. Let me just add to that, that I can tell you that, I know I've said it before, and I can't tell you how proud I am of the men and women of the Brockton Police Department. The times are tough, and a lot of them feel abandoned. And morale is at a premium. But why I stress that I'm really proud of them, they also know that the show goes on. And you've been seeing in the newspaper that these officers, they're out there getting guns and seizures of drugs all the time. You haven't seen your officers quit. They're still out there doing a job. And they haven't included the city in any litigation. They're professional. And Counselor, to your point, you're never going to have me say no to training. Okay, I don't see a downside to that. We have an awful lot of experience over there, but training and the new vision, anytime we can look at something a little bit different and help the officers out. We try to get case law out to them. Sometimes the day that it comes out, decisions come out, and we change our policies according to that. We try to stay ahead of that. And I know I've been here before and told you that I really believe that we train more across the board than any other department in the state. We not only do the mandated in-service training, we have in-house additional training from everything from 911. We do our own medical, CPR. We shoot 3 times as much as the state mandates for training, and I explained to you before why we do that, because departments that train a lot in firearms have less shootings. That's paramount. And then when they have less shootings, they tend to have good shootings. So that is money well spent, along with the safety of the officer. They find themselves in that position. But we spend an awful lot on training, so I would definitely welcome any of that, Council.
Well, I'll leave it to you and the mayor about the issue of if overtime is needed between now and June 30th. I'll leave it to you and the mayor to get together with the solicitor about something that would protect our officers if they follow the guidelines we give them, that they'll be protected in court because it will be well documented. And the other thing I would say to my colleagues, I wish, and it just happened by chance, I wish you had heard the chase that ensued the other day in Brockton, on Forest Avenue, over into West Bridgewater, went down West Chestnut Street, ended up in the town of Easton. If you heard the professionalism on the radio, if you heard the degree of control that was exerted by the shift commander, if you had heard the radio transmissions, which were very professional, no hysterics, and to the best of my knowledge, not a shot was fired, and I don't think anyone was hurt.
Right.
And you have to really experience something like that to appreciate what the police do. The sensational stuff makes the news. The everyday stuff that they do with great professionalism doesn't make the news. And sometimes that drives me crazy. But anyway, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
All set, Counselor.
thank you.
Counselor Lally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, how are you?
You're good.
Good.
Yourself?
Doing all right. Getting old. You know, I wanted to just take a moment to say, you know, I'm glad this did come up. You know, speaking for myself and my ward, the parties and the ATVs and everything, huge problems. You know, I endless calls about all the stuff like that. They're a major problem, and they're one of the most important issues we have, because if we let these things slide, if we let these things continue to go, people will wonder what else they can do, and then we get into some serious problems. So I am very you know, very happy to hear all the things you're saying. You know, we've really noticed an uptick in response and everything, and we're very appreciative of that. So absolutely, it's fantastic. And I do want to mention, because Councilor Farwell brought it up, and it has come up a couple of times, not chasing the ATVs, not chasing the dirt bikes. I had a chance to talk to a family friend who actually serves as a police officer out of state, and then I decided after that conversation to check a couple of different, you know, major cities throughout the United States. That seems to be a pretty standard policy. You know, a guy driving a dirt bike irrationally anywhere is just as likely to get hurt here as anywhere else. So it makes sense. So I just had a couple of questions. You know, in your opinion, do you think that we currently have enough police officers?
Well, I'm glad you asked that with the help of the mayor.
Yeah, he's sitting right there. We got him now.
With the help of the mayor and everyone that's involved. We have just selected, I think it's going to be 15 new officers that they've been selected. It started out as 14, but we have another one that we had a recent retire, so I think we're moving that number up to 15. And we're progressing quickly, trying to get them into an academy that hopefully that they'll be with us by late next spring, early summer, when we can really use the bodies.
Yeah, fantastic.
So we have to build up the manpower, but this happens. It happens sometimes, as council follows, you know, sometimes we have a lot of retirements, and sometimes it's relatively quiet for a couple of years. So we're in one of these down things, but we've recently just selected these officers, and we're trying to get them into an academy now.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And the only other question I'd have really is, it's kind of open-ended. You mentioned when you were talking about some of the constitutional issues regarding responding to people's homes, and I don't want to get too deep into that. This isn't, this isn't a courtroom, but I just, if you have any more you'd like to expound on that for the folks at home, because there are people out there who have neighbors that are driving them up a wall, and sometimes due to their own constitutional protections, they're able to, do a little bit more than we'd like.
Right, and I explained last time in this case law, and it's well known to plenty of officers. It's Commonwealth versus Kaiser. Police cannot enter a private dwelling simply just for a loud radio type of thing, or a loud noise. We can enter with consent, a search warrant, or under exigent circumstances. And loud music doesn't fall under any three categories. Like I mentioned, when it's a business that is set up, that the very premise that it's an illegality that's going on, that doesn't rise to the same level as a private dwelling in that. So the officers have to wisely monitor that and engage that, because there was a decision that also included Brockton officers, which I totally felt that the officers were quite right. The officers were even beaten when they went into the house, and the court still ruled against us, and they ruled in favor of Kaiser case. So these are the kind of things. Private dwellings are slightly different.
I appreciate the information, and you guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson?
Well, yeah, sure, quickly. Just the earlier example you gave, were there about the commercial party where there was marijuana and illegal liquor found? Were arrests, did arrests result from that?
The sponsors weren't there at the time. They'll be subject to being charged in court. But when the officers got there, they were literally just setting it up, and the people who were putting it on weren't there at the time. And the officers felt, because there was already 200 people there, that before it doubled in size, they had to end it right there. So they seized all the contraband, and obviously that's still under investigation. It'll be forthcoming from that. But the party that they identified that we're going to be dealing with is out of Hartford, Connecticut. So it tells you what kind of traveling they're doing to put on these parties.
And what charge would that person be?
There'll be drug offenses, can be Chapter 138 alcohol offenses, allowing all this. Some of the other things that we've done with the residents.
The disorderly house statute?
Well, yeah, it'd be along with that, with the disturbance and all that's going on. I do also want to tell the councils that these cases that are pending in court and dispositions, I don't have the exact chapter and section, but we will pursue, as part of the disposition of the case, any cost that the city incurred. So if we have a situation where the city had to go and clean the street, or we had to hire extra personnel to come in and deal with this, or if our officers got detained for a long period of time, we're going to try and get those costs, recoup some of those costs with the disposition of the case. Sometimes it's an order of the probation department, and we're going to try and recoup anything for the city that we can on some of these cases.
We appreciate that, Chief. And then just lastly, for yours and the public's knowledge, that come this next ordinance committee, we will be discussing a new noise ordinance. So hopefully you'll have another arrow in the quiver to deal with these issues.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All set, Counselor? Counselor Cruz?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. I mean, these have been driving us crazy for quite a while, and we had one last week, and of course, we had a pretty bad one up on West Elm Extension, but it was also the day of shooting on the east side when your men were tied up with the police chase, which they did such a good job on. One of the things what's the rules on if they're parked illegally? Do you have to warn somebody before you tow a car?
No. No, in some of these house parties, we tell people that, that they need to leave, and if they don't leave in an appropriate amount of time, we could start towing the cars. We will tag them and tow them.
Because, I mean, what you're talking about just a minute ago, we can't, criminally, the court's not going to say they're doing any, but if we start hitting them all, you get a bunch of young people in particular, because that's mostly who it is. If they start getting a $100 towing fee and a storage fee, and they lose their car and they can't find where it went, and it takes them 3 days to find where we towed it to, they're going to stop going to these. And that's when the word gets out that it's not a place to be, that you don't want to go to Brockton because they're towing your car and they're making it not fun to be at because, I mean, I've talked to some of your guys, and these people are from Hartford, Connecticut. But the people coming to these parties are not mostly Brockton kids either. And I shouldn't say just kids, they're adults too. But they're from out of town. We got to make it so that it's not attractive. And I understand that there are constitutional rights involved, and we don't want to make it into a war. But we need to make it so that they don't want to come, so that the word gets out all through the South Shore. Don't go to that party that they were advertising on Facebook, because in Brockton they don't want us here, and we don't want them here for this. We want them to buy houses and become nice members of the community, not to come and be. I mean, that was a Tuesday night, that party, and the shooting they had. And I mean, this isn't even Saturday nights anymore. This is almost every weeknight there's something going on.
Right. We had one on Lawson Street, which resulted in gunfire, and
Yeah.
majority of the people that were identified there were from Somerville North, mostly North Shore, because that's where it was advertised. This was a last-minute destination. So we had that down there, and they were not Brocktonians for the most part.
And it should be mentioned, the mother of one of the victims made a point of coming down and talking to you about the great job that the police did taking care of her daughter, correct? Her son.
She wanted to thank us personally for saving her son's life. He had been shot a couple of times, and they couldn't get medical assistance, and the officers stabilized him enough to save his life, and then they literally carried him a block up the street.
We saw the picture, and I mean, that's
Yeah.
shows what a great job our department does, and
It was outstanding.
police, fire, and EMTs, and I mean, that's what we do, and we're doing it for people that we have these are not Brockton people that we're helping out. These are people coming in to ruin our city, and they need to get the word that we don't want them here. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chairman.
Counselor. Counselor Ianieri.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief, how are you this evening?
Good evening. Thank you, Councilman.
And I appreciate you coming this evening, you and the mayor and our city solicitor, and bringing us up to speed on what's been going on throughout the city. And as we all know, no matter where or what we all represent, the whole entire city's had its ups and downs this past summer season with whatever it may be, parties and traffic and traffic control in it. And I think all in all, and what we've had, and we had some hot, humid days and some rainy days, and we just had everybody just running their own little mock. I think we have great control of it, to be truthful with you, and I appreciate that. And as you know, and the mayor knows, I had difficulties at the South Middle School with the Nelson Playground 2 or 3 weekends in a row, and you know, you and I had contact a couple of times on a Sunday with that, and that seems to have settled down. Once we made that playground part of the curfew, it did diminish itself. There are some that stay there at 5:30 or 6 and might be 20 or 25, but I don't have a problem with that, because I find those are the youngsters that are in the neighborhood that are utilizing the playground to their ability to play basketball. I even have a couple of neighbors of mine that they take their younger sons down, they go down there, that's where the hoop is, because they don't have one in their own yard. So I think, you know, we're in control, and of course things are changing now. It's already dark at 5 or 7, and next week it'll probably be dark at 6:30, and you know what happens after that. But I do commend you, all of you, on working on that, and I think even parties that I had within my neighborhood, I don't recall calling to make any complaints on parties, and I had 2 or 3 of them very loud within my neighborhood, from Donald Street, Market Street, even up further up from West Chestnut Street, but they all concluded at the proper time, and I think they were all in control, because they knew that, you know, we're old enough to have the party the way it should be had, and not, you know, for it to go out of control, and it never did. But yes, we've had some other situations with gunshots and all that, and you know, those are things that probably will continue to happen, because I don't know how we get control of guns. That's an issue that we'll all have to fight off somehow, some way. You more so than us, but still, I think we're doing the right thing, and I'm pleased with that. The only thing that sometimes I get a little bewildered with is, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I know the past administration was very hot on it, and I'm not a lover of see, click, fix, because I find people on see, click, fix with the same issue, not once or twice or 3 times, 8, 9, 10, 12 times. And I just bring to your attention, there's an area that I have, and you probably have heard it, and I know there's been some responses to it, but I have the same person that she has nothing better to do, or she or he, I guess, lives on Bouvet Ave, and report it over and over and over and over about traffic. Traffic's a raceway, it's a raceway, it's a raceway. Traffic, no one's doing anything, you don't do nothing, you don't do nothing. The council's worthless, he doesn't do anything either. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm going to try to go out there some night and, see what I can do to stop the traffic, but I think some of it's just a waste of time, and I think there's some control going there, but I travel the street all the time, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. I've yet to see where this heavy traffic is. It really, it's a straight flow, and you can, I guess, fly down there, but still, I just get tired of seeing it. But I just wanted to make mention that, for whatever, I hope that we can be out there just checking it just for the safety's sake of this particular person, anyone else within the neighborhood. But those little things just drive me a little bonkers.
We can speak more about that.
Yeah,
We'll see
I
if
think
that
we
gets
need to,
addressed.
because I think some of it's just an overburden. I do get tired when someone says someone left a McDonald's bag out at the end of my driveway, can you come pick it up? Why should somebody come pick it up? If they did that at the end of my driveway, guess who picks it up? Me. I mean, so I don't want to be a wise guy, but in any case, and I'm pleased to see that we're going to be putting on some more officers as well. I think that's most important. You were delicate when you answered Council's question, because in all my years of being here, we never can say, yes, we got the total amount we want, because we never do, because of retirements and everything. But still, I think it's great.
15 new officers would be a substantial shot in the arm, and then I'll be able to, I want to do more with code enforcement. I want to do more with traffic enforcement.
Right.
And that's where that's going to come from.
Well, as I mentioned when you came on, and I know I mentioned even when the mayor became mayor, and I mentioned it when I was councilor several times, and even when I ran for re-election, we definitely need to be doing something with traffic. I truly just believe in more of a traffic division than we do a traffic commission. I think we've got to spend more time out there, because it's not just happening here in Brockton, it's happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. I don't know if anyone has ever a chance to drive a highway now with the lesser speed. They don't go 60, they go 95 and go flying by you. So, I mean, traffic's traffic, but I think we can do more there, and I know that you're trying to work on doing some of that. So I just commend you and commend everyone. I think we're in much better shape than we were, even 6 months ago. Appreciate it, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chairman.
Counselor. Counselor Cardoso.
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good evening, Councilor.
Good. So I just have a question, and then for the mayor as well. The curfew, how are we enforcing it as far as the licensed establishment? Chief, this is kind of for both. And how long is the curfew going to last, Mayor? Because I'm hearing from some establishments they're abiding by the curfew. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, Council, I'll
And
tell you.
some are not. And so there's, my business is shutting down and we're following the rules, and then other folks are going on past the curfew.
Yeah, well, it's going to last as long as it needs to last. We're going to really spike in the near future. We're almost at a red classification again. I sent you the dashboard, you saw it. We're not trending down, we're trending up, so we're still yellow with 286 loss of life. So I get calls and texts and from different business owners that are pretty upset that it's going, and I say, hey, I hear you, but my job as mayor and your job as a city councilor is to represent the community, right, to make it as safe. So there is no drop-dead date on when it's going to stop. It's going to stop when the metrics prove it, and when Dr. Herman says to me, you know what, we really are in a good place. We're not there yet. In terms of those that are not abiding by that, shame on them. I'll say it again, shame on them. And I have the police chief and his staff looking into that. I'm hearing the same establishments that you're hearing. And it's just not right. It's an unfair advantage, number one, but it's also breaking against the whole idea of trying to control our own community so that the deadly virus will be mitigated, minimized, and cease in the city of Brockton. So there won't be a drop-dead date on that, Council, at all.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And then, Chief, are the police driving by to these establishments, or how is that working?
We have officers that are also, part of their duties that they're licensed agents. I really can't go into a lot of detail, but we have some establishments who are already watching.
Okay.
And you know, an investigation's ongoing, and there will be reports to the License Commission to this activity, which they could lose their license or face a suspension. I would rather have them heed the warning, especially during these difficult times. But we're going to do what we need to do according to the law.
Would you say for the most part, most of them are abiding by the rules?
Yes,
Okay.
overwhelming, yes. We do, when I say that we're looking at establishments, a small handful, but they will be dealt with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Counselor Nacastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. Thank you for being here.
Good evening.
Let's begin by speaking about mini bikes, ATVs, and motorbikes. I'm wondering, they don't have to be licensed, right?
No, they do not.
Right. And so, what are the rights of the riders?
Well,
Generally.
they don't meet the criteria of a street legal motor vehicle as defined in Chapter 90, so they are not to be operated on a roadway, regardless of age of the operator. Whether, even if you have a Massachusetts driver's license, you can't drive a mini bike in the street. We've seen this become a problem this year. Part of our traffic unit, we move them around according to need. Usually this time of the year, we have them working days primarily because the schools are starting back up and we have school buses, and people kind of have to, you know, school buses get introduced, traffic patterns and everything changes, and dealing with that and distracted driving and also a lot of kids crossing streets, so we make that the premium. But since schools really haven't gone back, we're looking at moving these officers to the early evening and dealing more of that, because that's when we have more problems with the mini bikes and ATVs. We do not have a no chase policy in the city. What we do is we take our chase to the level of what we're chasing. Obviously, if we're chasing a bank robber or someone that's just been involved in a shooting, that takes a different priority than chasing a 12-year-old kid on a mini bike. And we have to judge that, and that's why our ranking officers have to monitor the chases and call them off as soon as they feel that we're reaching the outer boundaries of not only liability but risk and danger, okay? Depending on the seriousness of the crime, you know, we have to stay in it, obviously some other things. Like the other night, the council mentioned, this was talking about cars involved in shootings. That's a different pursuit altogether. But we're trying to deal with these kids. And I'll tell you, because we're also dealing with the factor of other police communities having no chase policies. So when some people relocate out to the city or they visit here, they think that it's the same as it is in other communities, where they can just ride their mini bikes on the sidewalks in the middle of the street, whatnot. We have been actively doing that. I urge people, when they have this in their neighborhood, to call right away. It's of little or no help to us to call us the day after and let us know. But we're asking things like, is this a constant? What time of day? Does this kid live in the neighborhood? We've had successes actually going to the house and dealing with parents and explaining to them. We also have some mini bikes at the station that we've seized. So we're getting all kinds of different results. We are out there. We just don't want to be involved in any bad chase that doesn't rise to the level of what we need to do for public safety. But we are following that up, and I do plan on moving the traffic officers more to an afternoon, early evening, where these mini bike issues have been more prevalent. Unlike a marked unit that may get pulled off for a call or something more priority, they'll be able to concentrate in some of the problem neighborhoods for when these mini bikes come out. And we do have some neighborhoods that it's a constant problem, and we're dealing with that.
Well, there's a pack of mini bikes that goes down Carl Avenue most weekdays around 4 or 5. I have a constituent who writes to me regularly about them. He's also followed them home and found where some of them live. God bless him. Tell me about the consequences if you catch the rider.
They would, if we catch the rider, they're subject to arrest, okay? It's a Chapter 90 violation, riding on a public way. You're operating an unregistered, uninsured vehicle on a public way that is subject to being towed. And whatever motor vehicle offenses were also observed, whether they be speeding or failure to stop for the police or not wearing a helmet. All these violations come into play. For these young kids, it would deter, guilty finding would deter them from getting their licenses for at least up till the age of 18, if not more. So there are some penalties in there, but they are all motor vehicle offenses.
Okay. And you, if you can catch them, do you confiscate the equipment?
Yes, the mini bikes or the quads, if they're stopped on the street, are subject to being towed. But some of the ones that we're following up after the fact, where we can either issue a citation after the fact, and we're not asking any neighbors to become a witness against them. Just any information we can get, we'll deal with it from there. And we also have had some successes dealing with parents, advising them with that.
I get a lot of calls about this equipment on the roads and on the sidewalks. Do the police get a lot of calls? They must.
We do, and it's one of these calls that I would ask the neighbors to call when they see it on the street. Like I said, a day or two later is very little use to us, because it could be someone else on a mini bike, they're wearing different clothing, we don't know that we're dealing about the same one. And especially if it's in a concentrated neighborhood, we looked at the number of calls that we've gotten in that neighborhood, and we know that mini bike or something is close nearby, and we can concentrate there and put an end to it. Because I know what one mini bike can do to a neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon. So that's why we're looking to move the traffic officers and deal with some of these issues, even more than what we're doing.
Okay. And now let's talk about parties, because I think Ward 4 must be one happy place, because I get more calls about parties in Ward 4. Copeland Street, Montello Street, Fairbanks Road, Smith Avenue, South Layden, Coral, Laurelston, Carl Avenue. Those are the ones that just immediately come to mind, and I know there's plenty more. And usually I make you aware of them as well as our sergeant liaisons. But this is the question I have, and I actually posed this to the mayor, I think yesterday or today. I know that the police have priorities, okay, and that felonies come first and all that. But what my neighbors can't understand, and I kind of understand how they feel, is why are they made to suffer for hours on end with this loud music, the fireworks, the cars blocking their roads? Why must they suffer into the night instead of having them shut down? I understand about constitutional rights, but when there's clearly more than the legal allowed number of people on the premises between inside and outside, when it's clearly involving loud booms and, the street being plugged, it can't get an emergency vehicle down it, why do we wait so long to shut them down?
Well, the issue with shutting down some of these parties, the compliance end of it is on the homeowner or the people having the parties, okay? We send officers there. Sometimes it's more of a patronizing thing that they do to the police. They comply, they turn the radio down. Guess what happens in about a half an hour? We're getting a call back, so we're going back. And once we're doing this 2 or 3 times, or at least in the second time or the third time, now we're ending the party. The time of day becomes an issue to closing the party. It's a lot different to try and close a party at 7 o'clock at night versus at 1 in the morning. With the kind of the statewide
curfew,
we have the city curfew, but even before any curfews, 11 o'clock was kind of the standard, if you can understand that, where now the courts may not want to look at a party that was closed or people charged at 7 o'clock at night. But we also have to do our due diligence and document the fact that we went several times. Okay? They do comply. When the officers leave, they're in compliance, but an hour later, we're getting calls again because the music's back up, or more people have showed up. I've had officers go to a party, and an hour later, they say, there's another 100 people here. This wasn't the same party from an hour ago. So we have all these factors that go into it. But we also want to make sure that we're on solid ground when we end the party, because we know confrontation comes. It's going to be arrests. And obviously, all those arrests have to be lawful. So we have to document everything that we've done there. Okay, so every time we return to a call, we're facing different parties, even at the same location. If you can understand that, if I explain that.
I do understand. Do you think higher fines would deter this kind of activity?
Well, what we're already doing, charging people criminally, these people who are having these house parties are going to have a criminal record at the end of this. And we're not letting these go. I'm making sure that these complaints have issued. And depending on the call, how many times we've been there, especially if we needed the whole shift, we're going to be seeking something out as far as getting anything back to the city for any costs that we can justify. But these people are going to end up with a court fine and a criminal record. That'll be on a record. It's not like paying a parking ticket. It'll be on their criminal record. And if that doesn't deter them, but that's what we have in our toolbox right now.
Well, you know, I support the police. I've been treated very well by the police overall in my questions on behalf of constituents and residents. I think most residents support and appreciate the police as well. But of course, you know, until the day when you need the police to come and help you with something, you don't truly know how much you appreciate them being there. And I think some residents get disappointed by waiting, you know, by the wait, by action not being taken. And it gets old. It gets old. And also, I think a lot of people are cranky this year because of COVID and COVID-related impacts. It's just one of those things we have to tough out.
I can understand that, Counselor, and everything is on a factor onto it itself. Response times really depends what's on the board. And earlier tonight, there was a grant for a dispatch and everything operation. It's substantially larger because we're able to show our call volume is so much more that we got a substantial increase in it. And we're dealing with outdated equipment. It's amazing the number of calls. So at any, you know, when we're handling that many calls, and you know, I think this year we're going to be right around somewhere between 48 and 50,000 911 calls. That's just 911. That's not. Everything. That's not that times 3 or 4 with the other non-priority one calls. Depending on what's on the board, creates a priority. I do get calls from people sometimes thanking me that the cruiser was there within 5 minutes, and then they may call and be upset with me because it was a delayed response. But I'm always willing to take the time and explain what was going on that day at that hour, and to see if there's any way we can do better.
Okay, the only other thing I'd like to say very quickly, I'm sure others want to speak. The first impression that a resident gets of the police station is when they call and it's the person who answers. That's the first impression. And I just want to impress on you how important it is to have that person do their best to be polite and patient and try to be understanding, because most people don't call unless they need the police.
Well, I'd like to tell you that all calls, emergency and non-emergency, they're all recorded, and we will listen to them on any complaint, and we have taken corrective action, Counsel.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All set, councilors? Entertain a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, number 7, I believe. 8.
Ordered that the City of Brockton appropriate the amount of $2,934,376 for the purpose of paying costs for the roof replacement project at the Huntington Alternative School, 1121 Warren Ave, Brockton, Massachusetts, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the City of Brockton may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the Brockton Public Schools. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The City of Brockton acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is non-entitlement, discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any projects cost the City of Brockton incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the City of Brockton. Provided further that any grant that the City of Brockton may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 79 58/100% of eligible approved project costs, and determined by the MSBA, or two, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA, and the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the City of Brockton and the MSBA. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of the issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of the costs approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, $20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to the borrowed to be paid such costs by a like amount. Further ordered, that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under MGL Chapter 44A and all bonds or notes of city authorized by this vote, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require. The CFO, in accordance with Section 5 of Chapter 324 of the Acts of 1990, certifies the purposed appropriation of and borrowing authorization for $2,934,376 for the purpose of roof repairs at the Huntington Alternative School without a detrimental impact of the continuous provision of the existing level of municipal services. This is a conditional certification based upon developing a clear plan for long-term debt management. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Michael Thomas, Superintendent, Brockton Public Schools, Aldo Petronio, Chief Financial Officer, Brockton Public Schools.
Good evening, Mayor.
Madam Chairman.
Mayor, I know that our CFO, Mr. Clarkson, did put copies of this at everybody's desks. It's the letter from the superintendent of schools with the correct amount. So I believe Councilor Ianieri is going to make a motion with the correct amount that is required with an amendment to the amount.
Thank you, Madam.
Councilor Ianieri.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and as we all do have in front of us, there has been a change from what was originally in the order. So at this time, I'm going to ask that we amend this amount that was originally given to us for $2,934,376 to $2,942,058 is what we're going to be working with in regards to the repair of the Huntington School roof.
That's in the form of a motion. Is there a
motion.
second?
Second.
A second, but can you say the amount again, please?
Pardon me?
It's
What's
on
the
this.
amount?
Amount again, please?
The amount.
Why can't you hear? The window in your way?
It's on this, Councilor Cruz.
it's on
So
your-
it's,
Two.
the letter is right there from the superintendent of schools that was given to us from our CFO.
You want the number again?
No, I've got it, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
On the motion, or?
yes, on the motion, and by the way, I don't disagree with what's being proposed. I don't believe the city council can increase a borrowing order.
I believe it was an error. Mayor, I don't know if you want to speak on this,
so
or?
there's a difference of $7,682, and the superintendent's letter is the accurate number. Our belief, and Dr. Jim Cobbs is here as well tonight from the schools. He's not an invited guest, but he has a lot of institutional knowledge. We're under the impression, Council, that because it's not an appropriation, it's an authorization to borrow, that we can make this amendment here on the floor instead of going back through the whole process. That is what we've been informed, and that's what the pretense we're going under. The difference itself is minuscule in terms of the reimbursement back, almost a little shy on 80%, and we're a little bit over 20%. But we wanted to make sure we had the actual hard number once we submitted the order, and we were informed that we're off by $7,682. That's why we're here tonight, to talk about a desperate need. The roof is infiltrated with water, but we want to make sure everybody's on the same page relative to the actual hard dollar, because that amount that Mike Thomas has before you is what we're going to be submitting back to the state.
And Mr. Mayor, I don't disagree with what's being done, and if it's the will of the body, that's fine. I just didn't want to establish a precedent that you might put in a borrowing order someday for $2 million, and the council decides, well, you know what, we know better than the mayor, we're going to up that by $1 million. I mean, you know, Councilor Cruz said once, beware of the unintended consequences of what you're doing. So if you're comfortable with it and we're not setting a precedent and it's perfectly legal, then I'll vote for it. I'm just being a little bit cautious that it's, you know, it's basically setting this body up to say, well, we can exceed what the mayor is recommending.
Yeah, I mean, you can opine on it. I hear what you're saying, Counselor. I would...
I think the counselor makes a valid point, though, just to describe the process as it unfolded. After this order was filed, the Massachusetts School Building Authority provided an updated number to the school CFO that he then conveyed to the mayor and to me. So because the request is coming from the mayor and represents an increased grant amount and is directly tied to the increased grant amount from the SBA, I would suggest to you that it does not set a precedent that the council could act unilaterally. This is solely in response to the MSBA's correction and the request to increase the amount of the grant from the MSBA.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have Aldo here, who, if somebody wants to ask him a question. Counselor, I know Counselor Lally had a question. Did you have a question, or is it?
On the motion, I think it's a valid point that the counselor is making. We have the city solicitor here.
Correct. Okay.
Maybe we can get an opinion from her on that.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening.
Admittedly, I have not reviewed these filings that you're looking at. I'm familiar with what you're talking about. It's a borrowing order for some school repairs for the Huntington School. I think that the action you're taking is appropriate in this circumstance based on the information that we all have right now. There was an incorrect filing that we're all trying to amend. I think that the amendment could come in various fashions, one of which was a motion may not be the most appropriate, as the counselor points out, because that's not necessarily the authority. But I think the amendment could be made on the filing. And the substance of the filing is that you're going to ask for this money for borrowing and we're going to pay this much back. There can oftentimes be errors, whether a scrivener's error or not. And I think that this is the opportunity just to effectuate a change for that. It's not providing authority for the council to increase the borrowing. I think it's highlighting an error and making a correction.
Just, Counselor Lally, did you have a question, or did?
Oh, actually, the solicitor just touched on what I was going to say. I was going to ask if, you know, we can just chalk this up to a scrivener's error, not enter any deeper, you know, constitutional crisis, and move along, because I know that the ward councilor has mentioned this is important.
Counselor Cruz?
If I'm Councilor Cruz,
Counselor Cruz has had.
Actually, if it can be described as a scrivener's error, I mean, I seconded this, and I think we all want to get this done, but I am a great believer in the law of unintended consequences, and I'm not sure I agree that we have the right to amend it up.
I don't disagree necessarily on the motion, that maybe that isn't the appropriate procedural mechanism to effectuate what needs to happen. I do think it could still be made based on the document provided from the superintendent and what was from bond counsel and what was provided from the state level in terms of the monies on the project. And the fact that we're all identifying it right now in an open forum about what was just a mistake apparently on a calculation. But either way, taking action in this regard wouldn't bind you in the future or expand your authority in the future to allow you to increase, you know, funding.
So should the amendment include to correct a scrivener's error?
I would suggest that would be helpful. Anyone looking back at the documents would be able to see that, you know, how we came up with this calculation, the amended revised calculation.
So I guess we'd ask our counselor to add that into his amendment would be the best thing.
I think so.
And I have no problem making the amendment different from what we had mentioned, using the amount of money that was said, indicating that it was within a scrivener's error. I would think that that's the way that we'd want to read it. Now, if you want me to say it differently from that, or just, how do you want me to? My key is, councilors, I don't want to, I understand where you're all coming from, but I don't want to see us fool around with it, and all of a sudden we're playing back and forth, because the way the state operates right now, we lost some money already in the school department. If we lose this money, then that means that's a school that can't be operated, because this is going to make it so that we can operate that building for 20 more years. So I understand what you're trying to do, and I concur. I think the mayor's happy with it. Chief Financial Officer, you're all set with it. Mr. Clarkson, you're fine with it, and I think all those fine with it, right? So I think that's what we do. Just include it as with what we had. The amount was within the scrivener's error. That's how we go forth.
Thank you, Counselor. Mayor, did you?
Madam President, just point of information, we have a hard October 23rd date from the state, so if we don't meet that, we truly would jeopardize this project without question, and I just confirmed that with all the Petronio as well. So, I mean, it's a $7,682 scrivener's error, miscalculation. You know, the facts are the facts, but we want to get it right. But we also do not want to jeopardize the City of Brockton losing almost 80% reimbursement back from the state.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. So the amendment will include the correct amount of
$942,058.
That's, your amendment will include that, Counselor, as well as that it's a scrivener's error. This is a
As
correction.
well as that it was a scrivener's error.
amount.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
That's
so if
the-
we can just jot that down and bring it to the clerk, we'll get you a piece of paper so that can go into the minutes.
I think I can find a piece of paper.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So on the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The amendment carries. And then we had a motion to recommend favorably, and it was properly seconded as amended.
No.
Oh, what, we
Move
didn't?
to recommend favorably.
Second. Now we do.
Oh, okay.
Now we're good.
And was that seconded?
On that motion, I'd like a further discussion.
Counselor Cardoso?
So, Troy, we spoke earlier about this. We're voting on recommending favorably now, right?
Yes.
Okay. We spoke earlier about this. I just wanted you to clarify this section, your section, Troy, as far as it being a contingent. Purpose of repairs of Huntington to continuous provision, existing level, what is it? A continual certification based upon developing a clear plan for long-term debt management. What does that entail? Can you just clarify for us what that entails?
Certainly. So, actually, in a few minutes, under a subsequent agenda item, I will present to the council a snapshot of the city's debt picture and where we're at right now in terms of principal and interest, what we pay annually, what we are projecting to pay based on some of the significant capital projects that will be before you in the next couple of years. And so I just wanted to highlight in that conditional approval the importance of together developing a long-term strategy for our debt management so that we can accomplish some of these capital projects, but minimize the impact of those capital projects on the taxpayers. And so I'm thrilled to be able to show you in a few minutes what is the beginnings of a long-term debt strategy that the mayor and I are working on that will allow us to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into our city's infrastructure, but minimize the impact on the taxpayers.
Thank you, Troy. And can I just ask Dr. Cobbs to speak? Came all the way over here, Dr. Cobbs, so why not?
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Can you just, for the public, just speak to what you do at the Huntington and how old that building is and how we need to do this? Like,
I wish you could see some of the pictures that we have for the whole project. This has been in the works now for a little over a year, and if you go into the Huntington and you go upstairs inside the attic, you will see there's little kids' swimming pools that are filled with water, and we have pumps that pump the water out into the, out of the, from the roof leaking. So there's things that catch the water and siphon it down into the pools, and it's then pumped out. There's damage to the ceilings, there's damage to some of the structure of the roof. So this project is greatly needed in order, like you said already, in order to be able to use the school for the next 20 years and more. It's at 80% funding with a $2.9 million, and that's just an estimate. That's not the actual bid yet. Once it's all approved, it has to go out to bid, so it'll probably come in less than the 2.9. So the $7,000 is probably a moot point. But, our share of that, responsibility is only about $700,000. So, like the mayor mentioned already, we have August 22nd before this we lose, we move or lose. We've already extended it once because we were trying to get this vote before the council here. So it's an important project that needs to get done. The damage to the building is continuing and it's insignificant.
how will the repairs impact learning at the school?
Well, what's going on in the water, if the water comes in, it's in the top floor, then it's go down to the second floor, so we'll end up closing classrooms. We'll end up shutting down parts of the building that won't be usable, and eventually we'll have to shut the building down until it's repaired.
And do we have plans for what to do with those students?
no.
I know we're doing, virtual right now, but eventually.
Eventually, right now the school is underutilized. It has a smaller, student participation group, the alternative school, but we're also looking at perhaps closing the Keith building, and then that, so we're losing two potential alternative sites. So at some point, we can't afford to keep losing school buildings. So
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cobbs. I appreciate it.
Thank
you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is for Aldo or Dr. Cobb or the MSBA, probably Aldo. The MSBA only approves projects that, and this is because I've had some questions about this, I'm fully going to support this, but if they felt it wasn't, that it was chasing good money after bad, they don't approve it, correct?
Exactly. When they come in, they have hundreds of applications across the state, and they go for the ones that are in most dire need first. So when they review...
And I guess, and not to interrupt, but not just dire need, but if they felt fixing this, we've spent a pretty good amount of money on that building, because it is 120 years old, I think, isn't it?
I think, yeah, 1889 or 1886.
How old is that? You were there at the opening day, weren't you?
I was. It was quite a facility in its day.
In its day.
To answer your question, yes, if they felt the building needed to come down and be rebuilt, they would recommend that. They wouldn't put a roof on it if they felt the rest of the building was not solid.
And so I just want the people at home to understand that, because if somebody question this, at some point, there is a tipping point where it's better to build a school, but this will take, what most of a year to do the roof by the time we go out to bid and finish it?
Yes, the actual project will be done in the spring if the timeline works out correctly, but the difference between this roof and all of our other schools is this roof still has an original slate roof on most of it. So you don't just rip it off. That's going to take some work to...
Will we replace it with a slate roof?
We asked the MSBA, metal, slate, tar, so the architect put together a plan, and the MSBA will decide in the end which one they're going to go with.
So we don't know that yet?
We don't know. It's probably not going to be slate, but it'll probably be between metal and asphalt, because there are some sections that are flat up there.
There are, okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Fowler.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, Counselor Thompson.
Good afternoon, Aldo. How are you? Evening, excuse me. So I'm not very familiar with the MSBA guidelines. So from my understanding, the requirement to borrow the full amount is just a procedural requirement to get in front of the MSBA for their final approval process, correct?
Exactly, correct.
So there's no expectation to actually borrow the 29.4.
No, and we never have. We've been borrowing from them since we built the Arnone and the Angelo School about 25 years ago. And there was never been an expectation to borrow the full amount. You just have to bond the full amount, and then you borrow whatever your percentage is. In this case here, it's a little over 20%, and any costs that they deem are not part of the project. You know, if you ended up remodeling a bathroom in there and that wasn't part of the project, they would cut that out and say you're paying for that separately. So, but they've always come through with their share.
Would there be any expectations to additional renovations of the building outside of the roof?
Not at this time, no. No, just the roof project. We're just trying to make it watertight.
And so then, at some point, we'll get a, what our 20.42% is, and then that's the actual money that we'd be bonding out.
Correct.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
All set, councilors?
Thank you.
Councilor Ianieri.
Aldo, just one question. I just wanna hear you say again, so I have it in my mind. What is the actual drop dead date that we have to have this amount in to them by?
We have to submit the signed council order to move forward on the bonding. October 22nd is the last date. That's why I said 23rd, it's out. But October 22nd, we received an extension due to the whole COVID situation to that date.
Okay, so by what we're doing here tonight, and then when we vote on Monday, so you'll be able to be walking this there, well, I don't know if you wanna walk there, but you wanna make sure that it's on its way, I would think the first week in October. Is that how it's gonna be?
That's what I think. If it's, September 28th is the final meeting, then the mayor has, 3 days to sign it? So we're looking basically at October 1st or so, and then...
Okay, and there's nothing that could jeopardize anything. Once that's done, this is done. I mean, there's nothing that could jeopardize this amount from never coming here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want you to follow through on that now. Okay. Thank you.
I went there myself and Captain Gomes. We were there 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade.
Thank you. You always look good standing there, Aldo. You always have the right answers. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor.
Madam Chairman, just point of information to the ward councilor. I created, as one of the roles, thank you very much, as mayor, when you're borrowing under this, is there has to be a committee. So in this case, it's the Huntington School Roof Committee. And as a component of that, I've already, I didn't even ask you, you're on it. The ward councilor's on it. I also have recommended that the ward school committee member be on it. Myself, superintendent's on it. All those on it. Jim Plouffe, building commissioner. I sat down today with Kerry. We already designated that, so we'll be ahead of the curve. So I'm not waiting 3 days. As soon as this gets approved, I'll sign it ASAP so we can get it teed up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, there was a motion, but I didn't hear a second. It was properly seconded?
Second.
To recommend this favorably back to the full city council as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 9.
Order that the City of Brockton hereby accepts a recoverable grant in the amount of $150,000 through Mass Development's Site Readiness Grant Funds to be used to improve site readiness on property located in the vicinity of the Good Samaritan Medical Center, 824 Oak Street, Brockton, Mass., the site for potential development of a new life science center. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, or designee, Joy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Good evening, Mr. May, and you had these placed at all the councilors' desks with a map of the site.
Yes. And I'm
Thank
glad we
you.
have the monitor so I can make a 20-minute presentation. I'll go fast. No, I'm kidding. We have been working with MIT, the Massachusetts Life Science Center, and Mass Development for the past 3 years, studying the life science industry in gateway communities, and in particularly here in Brockton. We have a couple of reports that we've published up on the webpage here that shows that there is a life science cluster in Brockton and along the Route 24 corridor, and they have developed a strategy for how we could help expand that sector. So bringing in new jobs, helping existing companies grow, attracting new companies to Brockton. And one of the things that we need to do is have a place designated for the expansion of those industries. You may know the area around Good Samaritan Medical Center. There is a lot of vacant and underutilized land. And we have an opportunity to work with Mass Development and Good Samaritan Medical Center to create a master plan, urban renewal, and the zoning to support the development of a life science campus there that will make that property available for redevelopment. This is a recoverable grant. We have identified one single piece of property that is owned by the City of Brockton, and that is the property that is identified in red on your map. We took it for tax title years and years ago, I assume. It's on a paper street. But as a recoverable grant, should we see this come to fruition, should we see development occurring specifically on that site, we would then be responsible for paying back that money out of the proceeds of the sale of that site. So if the site only took in $100,000, we would only have to pay $100,000 back. However, if we, got $1 million for it, we would pay, the whole $150,000 back. Mayor, would you? Oh, you're just moving.
Yeah, no, just wanted to give some. Councilors, I just want to give you some additional information. So again, this started under the administration of the late Mayor Carpenter, but I am privy to it because before I was elected mayor, I served over 10 years as a board member at the Good Samaritan Medical Center. So this had been discussed for some time. Some people will say, well, why there? I can tell you, I've had conversations since I've been mayor with different people that are looking to come to the City of Brockton, and they always say close to Route 24, close to Route 24 to be able to get on and off. Bob Coughlin, the CEO of Mass Biotech, and I had a very good conversation recently about this site, but also other sites, the old Farm America corporate office down on Pearl Street near White's on the right. It's a vacant building. Again, it's ripe for investment. We want to get on the tax rolls. So Mr. May is going to be able to opine on previous mayors. I can tell you that we need to turn over every single rock because of the financial ramifications that COVID has really created to our municipality. This may be one of the tools that we want to put in our toolbox. But again, this is going to take some time. It's taken 3+ years, and I don't think this is going to happen overnight. And there are other variables. There's a REIT, a real estate investment trust, that owns some portion of the property up there as well. So, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to give that information. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. So, Mr. May, so this grant is only on this outlined area in red?
Well, the recoverable portion of the grant. So
But what we're talking about tonight?
we're going to be doing a master plan for that whole area, but should the city sell that one particular piece of land in red, then that would trigger the repayment process.
So most of what else is in here is not owned by the city?
Correct. It's owned by the REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, that owns Good Samaritan Hospital. There's other pieces of privately owned property in there. And the other major tenant is Harbor One.
Oh, okay, that's the building, okay, down here. So we're just accepting a grant tonight from
Mass Development.
From Mass Development on this. What's the zoning in most of this in here?
Most of that is Zone C5, which is an office and medical office complex, but life science includes laboratory and smart manufacturing, light manufacturing, so there's a whole wide variety of opportunities there. But in order to support that, we need to have the vision for how the campus could lay out, where we need to put roads, how we're going to pay for that, who's going to pay for that. That's all part of this planning process.
And all we're looking at tonight is that $150,000 grant?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
All set. Councilor Fowler, followed by Councilor Cardoso.
Thank you. Mr. May, this is interesting because the area outlined includes some very well-established businesses, the new Tommy Doyle's, apartment complexes, the gasoline station at the corner of Oak Street and North Pearl, and we received this grant to develop a master plan that will foster creation of a life science and biotech hub along Route 24 on underutilized land adjacent to the Good Samaritan Medical Center. Where on this map would you, in your professional judgment, say that we have underutilized land that would be available, and for what size building? What are we talking here, for, you know?
The size of the building and sizes of the buildings are what we're going to determine through this process. We're going to determine how new roads would go in and serve this area. The area that is to the east and south of the hospital complex are part of this study area. It's that whole outline, or that whole section that we're looking at. And so, yes, there are existing uses there. They're obviously going to be incorporated into the plan.
But where would you, what is underutilized here where you'd put a building? For example, we've got the parking behind the hospital, and you can see that from this aerial view. Oh yeah, there's one right there. You've got the parking behind Good Samaritan, and the...
All of this is underutilized. All of this is underutilized. We have large sections of property in here. The way the parking is laid out could be reutilized for something else. If they were to build a parking garage...
Mr. May, I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't think they can hear you. You have to be in a microphone. I understand, but...
But the area that is to the south, all of this area down here and to the west, there's a substantial amount of underutilized and unutilized.
You mean by route, it says ramp 24 southbound to Route 27 northbound, and then it says Reynolds Highway? I'm looking at the black line. You've identified that area as what we would be studying. So the area you just pointed to, I don't see as being studied.
Well, this whole section, I'm sorry, this is I was including this to just show the red boundary for that one parcel. This whole area is the study area, from Oak Street to Route 24 to North Pearl and Reynolds Highway.
So the black line is meaningless?
Just, yeah, ignore the black line. I just copied this from another map because I needed the parcel that is the city parcel in red.
And so you're contending that Mass Highway would allow us to either have access roads or build off of that section in order to accommodate a life science building, or?
Roads would be accessible either off of Oak Street or off of North Pearl. We would not be able to access off of Route 24 directly or off of the highway ramp.
I guess what I'm worried about is I wouldn't want to set in motion something that might suddenly displace existing businesses, and we decide that, well, this is going to be an urban redevelopment area, and so International Deli and Chinatown Restaurant, and I think something just went into the Walgreens up there at the corner of...
The Family Dollar.
The Family Dollar, that suddenly we're going to decide at some point in the future that, well, wait a minute, we're going to do something different. We're going to displace you. Because I did notice in the paperwork that you indicated the consultant would help us create a plan where we would have to comply with the provisions of General Laws Chapter, I think it's 121B, which identifies properties to be taken,
yes, sir.
Relocation of existing businesses, and I just don't want to get involved in that type of issue in this area unless you have an absolute concrete client that says we're going to locate there. And I guess that's my other question is, how far down the road are we? Is this speculation? Is this a hope and a dream? Or do you have an entity or entities that say, you know what, if you make this available, we're coming to Brockton? Where are we in that process?
We do not have a master developer or an entity specific at this time. However, we have information that has been developed by the Mass Life Science Center, Mass Bio, of what properties, what space is needed in this particular sector. And so the idea of creating a master plan is working with the existing property owners, working with the potential realtors or brokers or developers to help bring those people to the table to create the vision for what we as a community want to see this area develop as. That then gets sold to a developer who is then going to implement, and I don't mean sold as in a check is written. It's the vision is sold to somebody to help implement this, or who is going to implement this plan.
Now, do we know if any of these parcels are for sale? I mean, in order to satisfy a developer's needs for a new life science building, there would have to be either a parcel or parcels for sale that you would put together, I would think, to create a campus.
We've had some initial conversations with the REIT that owns Good Samaritan Medical Center.
So this is really designed to augment them, I would say.
Well, they are the largest property owner in this area, yes.
Okay. And the reason I ask, and then I'll wind up, is we just had a conversation about Christo's site on the east side, and I know it's far from the highway, but I'm wondering how much easier it would have been to put a life science building there, especially if they're going to have an allied health building on the Massasoit campus. The campus and the kids young adults might be able to be involved in a life science building. Or the other area that came to mind is the old Howard School. Wouldn't I love to travel east on Oak Street and look up where the old Howard School is and see this modern facade and life science building, which is maybe 1.25 miles from the highway? So you're telling me that it's the professional bioscience community that's telling you it has to be here?
Adjacent to the hospital, adjacent to the highway, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. May, I think the thing that sticks out most to me about this, this picture you've provided, is sort of how it's a bit of a mess. It looks like, and it probably was the case, things were just added over time, piecemeal, no real future, aim in sight. And what also sticks out to me is just how much of it is parking lot. You can see from above, just they've paved over half the area. I think that, I look forward to seeing what comes of this. I think that there is some space off of Oak Street Extension, south of the hospital and east of the hospital, that something can be done with. I would just like to see something done. I think you hinted at that at the beginning, working with the parking lots. Maybe swap a couple of them out for a parking garage or something like that. Get some extra space that would help show the viability of this location. And of course, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't say, if this doesn't pan out, I'm sure we can find you some space on Spark Street or Intervale. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ianieri.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The one thing I look at when I'm looking at this, and obviously I see it as we've mentioned, it's a grant that's coming forth, and I think it's coming forth for us to talk about something that, again, is a new development to the city. And I'm not going to get crazy like I usually do about this, but I have to say that at this point in time, I think all we're doing, Mr. May, if I'm correct, is with this grant, we're going to be able to, put together what we believe has to be the right people in order for this to even be thought about, is to sit down and just talk about what we want to do. And I always find this, no matter what we try to do to talk about development, and the mayor was correct, we talked about this, it's been before the council here a few different times when he was a councilor as well, and it seems like when we get to that that level, we all of a sudden blow it way up. And that's the way I always see things here. I understand and I respect, the council at large when he says, we need to make, a better Brockton, but let's not make a larger Brockton. But let's talk about what we're going to do before we can even make it better or bigger. But we don't do that. And I respect this, being here before us and for us to take the time to even take a look at. The map that's here, a lot of free land is what I see off of this land, an awful lot of free land. Yeah, there's no doubt that there'd have to be some discussions, especially if you're going to be thinking about areas that detail Pearl Street and off-ramps. And, I just learned after 66 years that, we got Brockton Heights, so I'm sure they'd come into play somewhere because it's going to be, could it be a shortcut down my street? That's how we go. I mean, this is how everything happens. But I just get a little dismayed with it. No pun intended, Mr. May. But I just find it. We can't even take a moment just to discuss something, accept something that's coming to us that we may never even go any further than what we're doing right now, or maybe wherever the direction takes us to what we're going to be talking about. But at least let's at least talk about this situation. I mean, to me, I think I think it's a workable situation. A lot of work to do, but still, and that's not my ward, but we still, as ward councilors, we still represent the city in itself, and I am one that is going to, I say it all the time, development brings revenue.
Yes.
And people need to wake up in this council chambers and the next council as well, because the city is going to be needing revenue, and we can't base it upon our taxpayers all the time, every time. We just can't. We're going to need to do some things, sell water and sewage. We're going to need to do these things. That's what's going to help us maybe have something here that's also going to bring us aid that the city of Brockton needs. But that's all I have to say. I mean, I support what's before me, and hopefully we can get things moving. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. May. According to the language of the order, these funds are to be used to improve site readiness on the property. Tell me, what does that mean, improving site readiness?
Site readiness is the name of a program that Mass Development has created with money from the legislature that does tasks and activities that makes sites more marketable and more ready for development.
Okay. Well, in the instance of this site map, how would we, just give me some ideas, how would that be accomplished?
So with regards to this site plan, what we will look at is how to create, or how will we create a master plan for this area. So where would new roads come in and out? How do we deal with existing parking and future parking? How do we deal with the stormwater management in the river that runs through here? Would we improve the traffic flow on Pearl and on Oak Street with the several traffic signals there? How do we bring in the new utilities? How do we repark the site? Those kinds of activities. Then that plan gets transmitted or translated into what we hope will be a new zoning district or an enhanced C5 district for this area that takes a look at all of the proposed uses that is in the master plan and incorporates that into the zoning so that those things are by right and have specific design guidelines for how those properties are then redeveloped. We're also going to take a look at district improvement financing. There may be an opportunity to capture some of the improved revenue to cover infrastructure costs. Obviously, we would like to be able to cover most of those costs by working with Mass Works, which is a grant program from the Executive Office of Economic Development, Housing and Economic Development.
Okay. And How does the opportunity zone, this falls into the opportunity zone?
That is all within an opportunity zone,
And
yes.
how does that impact this? Is the
op-
timing right?
The opportunity, yeah, it is right. It is right, and I think that there's going to be some legislation that may eventually extend the opportunity zone, knocking wood. But investors who make a rollover capital gains into an opportunity zone project can really make an impact on their taxes come due.
Okay, and let's just say that I own the Foxy Lady, which is shown in this area that's outlined, okay?
Congratulations.
Yes, interesting idea. So let's just say I own that, okay? And so someone comes knocking at my door, this would be private investment, and says,
Yes.
you're in the special enhanced C5, and I want to build a lab here. And that's how you envision it would happen? It wouldn't be the city taking this land by eminent domain. This would be private investment coming in here.
We're hoping that this is all private investment coming in here.
Right. So eminent domain is not involved here.
If we put the right incentives here and work with the property owners that are currently here to understand what the redevelopment opportunities are, and first of all, there's more than enough vacant land that could start the development process before anybody even comes around to talk to you about your Foxy Lady.
Gracious. And this area here between the ramp and the hospital, that is also included in this zone?
That whole area within the highway, yes.
Okay, okay. And I think that's good for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cruz, followed by Counselor Cardoso.
I've already spoken once, so she can.
Okay, Counselor Cardoso.
Hi, Rob, thank you. Can you just clarify, because that was my question I had earlier when speaking with Troy, what we owned. So this little piece here in red is what we own.
Correct.
And you're saying paying back the proceeds, if we sell this little red piece, then we have to pay back this grant amount, this $150,000.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. So it's not, if we don't, say this life science project doesn't come to fruition,
We know
I know you're confident that you'll make this happen, but if it doesn't happen, so we don't pay this back unless we sell this little, can you clarify that?
Correct.
Because that's my only concern, is that
Language
this
of
is
the
a
grant-
repayable grant.
The language in the grant agreement specifically states that there is a trigger property, that is this piece of property. It establishes what the value is, the current value of that trigger property, and it says that if that property is to increase in value because of redevelopment based on this work that we're doing, then, and only then, do we have a repayment obligation.
And that's the only circumstance, situation where you would have to pay this back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Counselor? Any other counselors that haven't spoken yet? No. Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. I think just to clarify a little bit of what we're talking about here, this small piece of property is basically a little piece of collateral. It's really a bit of a little, I don't want to say hocus pocus, but it's a way for mass development to give us this grant. We have to have something in a piece in the pie. But what we're really looking at, and again, it may turn out to be a pipe dream, but let's be honest, there could be eminent domain takings. If this becomes what a life science center, and in fact, with all due respect to the Howard School and the Christo's property, those are not big enough for what these are envisioned, a life science campus. I think all of us, especially on the campaign trail through the years, whenever there's something that comes up, and in fact, the casino was a great example, or the power plant, why can't we get good businesses in Brockton? Why can't we get, I think the mayor will back me up on this, we've all heard it countless times, why can't we get life science industries, pharmaceutical industries, are high-paying jobs that are much better, that are those real businesses that we're trying to attract. But also, make no mistake, it would probably entail eminent domain takings, it would entail and it is a huge, it's a huge, I don't want to say pipe dream, this is a big vision that we're looking at for a small amount of money at this point. But this piece of what we're looking at would probably, you're talking acres and acres of a large campus to attract, I don't even want to say company names because I don't know them all, but this is not a minor project if it ever went forward. And it's not a project at this point. The people at home should understand this. But it is an opportunity to look at the chance to bring those high-paying businesses that we have all been saying for years we need. And again, we've had the power plant and the casino were proposed. Almost everybody who opposed those said, why can't we get better businesses? This is an opportunity to at least look at, and those companies are not going to come to Oak Street and Main Street. They're not going to come to over by Massasoit, although they may, because eventually, if Massasoit does build their life science curriculum bigger, there may be some opportunity to do something there with that. But these are going to be large campuses. Probably, they're not going to be two-story buildings with 20 people working in them. These are going to be probably manufacturing facilities, maybe research and lab work. But this is an opportunity to bring those businesses to the city that we've been looking for years. So this is just when you look at the little tiny piece of land that we own there, this is just our way of saying to mass development, okay, here's our hook, we're into it. Now let's look at, and we're talking, this could be 15, 20 years in the future, but you have to start somewhere to give this an opportunity to even then go out and be able to say that AstraZeneca or whoever it might be, hey, we've got 25 acres here or 20 acres that we can do this. Those people, they don't want to be anywhere but right near the highway. And it's an opportunity for us to at least look at that. And that's why I'll be making a motion to recommend favorably.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, number 10.
Ordered that the City of Brockton opt into the PACE Massachusetts program. The PACE program is an economic development tool for cities and towns across the Commonwealth that focuses on financing energy improvements in commercial buildings. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
So this was before us, and I believe, there were some questions on this. Counselor, was it Counselor Nicastro?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, goodness, I'm drawing a blank. What was I concerned about? Yes, I was concerned about what happens if they don't pay. Right? And we received, yes,
Mr. Clarkson?
we received an email addressing that.
I can answer that, yeah.
Yes.
Councilman Castro had some concerns about what happens and what the mechanics are if the companies that do receive these grants don't pay, and we reached out to some folks at the state agency, I think it's Mass Development, that answered those questions when we provided them to you. But I think at the last meeting, you also said you had some questions for Mr. May, which is why it was continued
was
about the
postponed,
program
correct.
in a larger sense.
Counselor Cruz?
I mean, I was away 2 weeks ago, and I believe this was in front of us 2 weeks ago, or
I'm sorry?
was this in front of us a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, it was postponed to this meeting.
Weeks ago.
It was continued. Yes, continued, sorry.
So, Mr. May, is this, the city has already been working pretty closely through the last 4 or 5 years with either Amoresco or Noresco about energy improvements. Is that the work that they are ready to do, but this is how it would be paid for?
No, this doesn't have anything to do with the Amoresco per se. Pardon me. What happens here is that there's been a new law in Massachusetts that allows for this special type of financing. And Massachusetts is now like the 40th state to adopt it. And the Massachusetts Development Finance Authority, Mass Development, is working as a conduit through the City of Brockton as being a conduit also to have property owners who want to make energy improvements to their property. Let's say it's a motel and they want to change out the mini splits, or somebody like Ted Carmen needs to replace all those windows in his project. They can apply for this type of financing. It's a fixed rate, long-term financing, which construction loans generally aren't. And it is paid off by an assessment on their property tax that we manage, but is payable to mass development. So we're the conduit to make that happen back to the Mass Development Authority.
And how do we get paid? So if we're handling it, there must be a fee for us?
We don't have any fee involved in the situation.
So for handling, we get no pay for doing the work and the paperwork and collecting the money and paying it out?
The money is, the paperwork is all pretty much filled out by the applicant and the finance company. What we are filing is a lien on their property, and we are filing or sending out invoices with their taxes.
But who's paying us for doing that?
Nobody.
Well, there's a cost to that, isn't there? I mean, if you had, I mean, there's certainly,
Recording fees?
there's certainly, our tax department and all would have to be taking time to do this.
I would say there is an administrative cost to doing it. What I believe the benefit of the program is that these businesses make improvements to their property, thereby making the property more valuable, thereby, in the long run, increasing the city's revenue. You can't draw a direct line from the project to increase tax revenue, but I think I would suggest to you that conceptually the project is a good idea because it's just one more tool in the toolbox for the city to encourage development. So by making these improvements, we create together more valuable property.
And is this in lieu of mass save programs for these people?
Mass saves, when you're dealing with property,
primarily,
you see mass saves on the residential side. They do some
Well, they
commercial
do
work.
quite a bit of commercial, too.
They do. But the major investments, buying new boilers, buying new windows, that is not being paid for by mass saves.
Sure it is. Well, I mean,
You usually, you get a rebate, maybe.
get a rebate, which
But
is substantial.
the vast majority of the purchase of that equipment, the installation of that equipment, is coming out of this lending pool that mass development has established.
Okay. And I apologize if these are the questions that were asked 2 weeks ago. I was away on vacation, so this is, they would actually get funded, and this is residential and?
This is just commercial property.
Just commercial property.
Commercial and industrial.
And the answer, I didn't get a chance to read your email. What is our liability if it's not paid?
There is none. In terms of the hierarchy of the liens on the property, this one would be behind property taxes, but ahead of any mortgage that was on the property. Did I get that right, Councilor Castro?
Yes.
So then that was the nature of the email that was sent to you to describe that.
But we don't have to pay, the PACE program.
That is correct. There's no liability in terms of return of those monies to the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councilor Cardoso.
Troy, if we spoke earlier, the betterment fees collected along with property taxes, so they all go on the same bill, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not thinking it's going to cause a huge, cost to include those folks that decide to opt into this program, because it's not going to be a whole massive, amount of people that opt in. Is that
I think that's a key point.
sort of like what we're saying? Okay.
So, and Rob would know better than I, but based on what I know about the program, I wouldn't anticipate a significant, a huge amount of properties that would subscribe to this. It may be a few or a handful, and so that led us and...
Right, because honestly, it's scary to me to have a lien on your property to do this. But I read there are some benefits to it for the improvement. So this is more so that the city has, like you said, another tool in the toolkit to attract folks to want to develop here, correct?
Correct, and as Rob said, it's strictly for commercial and industrial properties, so it would not be a program where homeowners would do this and there would be any sort of widespread implementation.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Counselor. I know Counselor Nicastro, you have a question, but we have counselors that haven't had the floor yet. Counselor Fowler.
Yes, just a point of information to my colleague from Ward 1. Properties eligible for financing through PACE include commercial buildings, industrial buildings, multifamily buildings with 5 or more units, buildings owned by a nonprofit organization. And I'm not saying this because I'm against the program. I just want all the facts laid out on the table here. The buildings owned by a nonprofit organization really irritates me because they don't pay any taxes to begin with, and we're going to be collecting, the betterment that's assessed on them to do this. The benefits to municipalities, according to the Mass Development website, are job creation, which I assume means you retrofit the buildings, business growth and environmental benefits associated with reducing energy consumption. So there are 20 communities that are in it thus far, and I did talk to our chair of the Board of Assessors, Councilor Cruz, and he does not object to the program and thinks it's a worthwhile one, but I just want to make sure we know exactly what we're embracing here if we go with this. Thank you.
Any other counselors? No? Counselor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions were answered. Thank you.
You're all set? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 11.
Order that pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4, the City Council authorizes the mayor to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Whitman for treatment of wastewater. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, or designee, Lawrence Rowley, Commissioner of DPW, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the council, the committee, so this is not a new IMA. We have an IMA with the town of Whitman. It's been in existence for a while. This is a renewal, but with much more favorable terms that benefit the city of Brockton financially. I stood up here not too long ago to tell you that I've had conversations with other municipalities, the town of Easton, East Bridgewater. We're in the business to make sure that our capacity for our residents is not jeopardized. And Larry, the commissioner's here tonight to share with you that, in his professional opinion, this makes sense. Megan, the solicitor's here to tell you why it makes sense from a legalese, how we're making more money. Projection is $800 to $900 to $1 million more for the city of Brockton. So, again, I'm here to answer any questions, but the experts are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions, councilors? Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. I don't know if this is probably for Larry, maybe for the mayor. In the agreement, and I'm not a lawyer, so I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but in the agreement, if the council votes an increase for our ratepayers, does it automatically get extended through to the next, to the town of, say, Whitman in this case? So if we vote a sewer increase, this is sewer, right?
Yes, it's sewer. Yes.
If we vote a sewer increase at any time, does it escalate?
Well, I think Troy can answer it better, but this is all by the flow. So I think it would be set, even though we increase ours. Theirs would stay the same as it is now, as we settle this.
So it doesn't, if we increase, it only increases the Brockton customers?
Correct. Correct.
Troy, can I ask you, is that a good, is that a good way to do an agreement?
the way the flows are calculated in this new agreement. And I should tell you that the negotiation of this particular amendment to the agreement took place over the course of literally several years, over 3 mayors and 2 chief financial officers, so it was a long and at times arduous process. The way the flows are calculated are updated in this, so I do believe that despite the fact that the rates may not change, the overall funds that come to the city from this amended agreement will increase. What we did to look at that, to prove it, we went back and calculated last year's bill under the old system and under the new system. And under the new system, the city's revenue increased by around $100,000.
And how long is this in place for?
This agreement is in place till 2035, I believe.
20 years.
But in the agreement, it dates back a couple of years, so it's a 20-year agreement.
So it's a 20-year agreement, and the rate doesn't change?
2035.
But it goes back to 2015.
But I guess my point is, and we've had this discussion here before, that we should be doing more often increases of lesser amounts. But it sounds to me like if we're going to increase it on our residents, it should be increasing on all the users, not just the Brockton residential, not just the Brockton users.
And what I can say in response to that, Councilor, is that this agreement was negotiated. It was a significant effort by the town of Whitman and the city of Brockton over the course of a very long time to get to the consensus that we're at. I think as someone who has conducted labor negotiations, you know, when both sides are unhappy, you know you probably have a good agreement. And this was an agreement that took a very long time to reach this consensus. So I'll answer the question broadly and say, do I think it's, in my professional opinion, a good agreement for the city? I do. Could there have been portions of it that were negotiated differently? Most certainly. But in the end, yeah, I think the commissioner and I feel as though this is in the best interest of the city.
Councilor, just to share a little bit, if we raise the rates in the city, that's because the plant probably needs some work. They will share a certain percentage, whatever we have to do to that plant to stay in compliance.
They have to pay their share.
They have to pay, yes, that would be paid through, yes.
But if the rates go up, which they certainly will over, so it's for another 15 years, say? This agreement
Yeah,
you
just
said
about,
goes
yeah,
back?
yeah.
I mean, I would assume that in the next 15 years, the rates will go up at some point.
I'm going to say yes, within the next 15 years.
But they won't for those users.
No, not that I'm aware of, no. I don't,
There are, however, let me try to clarify. There are escalators in the agreement, if you look at it, because we do
that's
an
what I'm
audit
asking.
of the city's cost. So they will pay a reimbursement for proportional costs of the city's actual salary costs to support the plan. If you look at the agreement, just to give you an example, Whitman shall pay Brockton a proportional annual amount for Brockton employees assigned directly responsibility for the oversight of the Brockton staff. And then there's another provision for administrative service. As Larry mentioned, a provision for capital improvements. So although the rate structure doesn't necessarily allow for a change in rates, as our costs go up, and they will, the proportional cost that Whitman will pay will go up. So it's not a static amount that they're going to pay over the next 20 years. The amount that they pay will go up, but it's been figured and negotiated in a different way than simply applying the rates. It's probably a better way to describe it.
So the way you're describing it, if rates didn't go up, their share still would go up.
If our costs went up, yes, absolutely.
Which, I mean, just labor costs alone will go up every time you have a new labor agreement.
Correct.
So anytime, so there are in here, and again, I didn't read the whole thing, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not gonna, now that we have such a great new city solicitor, I will leave it up to her to read these. Anytime our costs go up and I don't mean every incremental, but there are escalators so that in the year 2032, they won't be paying the same thing they are now.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam
All
Chairman.
set. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you. So, looking over the agreement, it says in section 1.2, it states that the parties are agreeing, and this is subject to audit, to outstanding balances which accrued from the past 4 fiscal years. Adding those together, it's approximately $1 million. And then section 7 says that all of the years preceding fiscal year 2018 are considered paid in full. Can you explain that? Was that, why are we walking away from those 3 fiscal years of outstanding balances?
We're not.
No.
No, we're not.
That-
We're agreeing, I think, not to audit anything before 2018. We're agreeing not to audit anything prior to 2018, but the amounts captured on 1.2 that you point out, inclusive of 2018 and previous, are going to be paid to the city.
Okay, so section 7, where it said that prior to fiscal year 18 was only regarding an audit and not a waiver or some other consideration, that those balances are now paid in full.
Yes, we're not waiving any of the funds.
Okay.
They've already paid based on the old rate. In good faith, they've been paying every year when they get invoiced, and they've agreed to pay the difference or the delta in between the new rate that we're putting on them, Counselor, to your question. So sort of that's evidence directly in here, what the city is going to, or what it will historically have received from 2015 to the present in terms of an increase.
So these new terms are basically retroactive to fiscal year 15, which increases that amount by about $1 million. Okay.
Approximately $100,000 per year, but FY19's bill has not been paid yet. The billing is a little delinquent, not anything to do with the commissioner or his department, just the way that they bill. And so 800,000 of the million is what's due for FY19, and then the remainder is the difference in the fiscal years, what was paid under the old system and what's due now.
Okay. Now, is that balance subject to the Chapter 40 and Chapter 59 interest accruing, or, because I know it said if there are any balances, then they're subject to interest accrual under Chapters 40 and 59, but are these balances subject to those interest accruals?
It doesn't appear from reading this that there is any interest on these amounts, as in terms of, I'm assuming these numbers were arrived at the final draft of this version for acceptance, and so there's not any additional interest that's going to be calculated on top of these numbers that
Okay.
are on page 2.
And then that full 4-year fiscal year additions, that's going to be paid in the normal course of April, I believe, of next year. Is that when those balances are due?
For beginning with 2016 to the present?
Correct.
They're ready to pay now.
They are.
Yes.
Great. And just kind of speaking about what Councilor Cruz was speaking about, this is not necessarily based on a rate. This is basically proportional payment on all the enumerated, the labor, the capital cost, our sewer operating costs, all of that. So they're paying a proportional amount and not necessarily a rate.
Correct. Absolutely. If you look on page 5 of 17, the actual treatment cost methodology is sort of spelled out there in actual words. So the total sewer charge is the Whitman flow divided by our total flow times an audited sewer budget. And so the financing numbers can be provided to you if you want, but then as you go down on pages 6 and 7, it breaks down what Whitman's actually paying for: operations, managerial oversight, administrative services, capital improvements, and it's all proportional share. So it's not just a flat rate flow system, and I think it is to the city's advantage to do it this way, because whenever users, Brockton residents, are subjected to an increase, that's sort of like taking into consideration all of these things that are spelled out into this agreement, but it's just a flat fee. So this way, if, you know, a capital of improvement is needed in a few years, we get to capitalize on the money that the city needs now, rather than having to wait to vote for an increase and then when it gets passed on to the residents.
Just more flexibility on the city's part to garner those increased costs throughout the system.
I would agree, especially in the case of a long-term agreement.
Now, is there an expectation that now, after years of negotiation, that this type of IMA would be the outline of any other IMAs we have with other cities or towns?
So, to be candid with you, it actually already is. And for example, in Abington, the big difference in Abington and Whitman is that Abington uses our actual infrastructure, so they pay a different type of fee for connection. And in Whitman, they have their own infrastructure for, I think it's up to, what, Larry, 260 feet or yards? Very close to our facility they dump in. So we already have a template that was created with lots of expertise, and this is the agreement that really we have used. And in, you know, the prior one was 1984, I think it was originally negotiated. So this is our modern version that we're using now in terms of our, the treatment cost.
So what percentage of our other IMAs are on this template? Was Whitman the last holdout, or are there other cities that we'd like to update when their IMA runs out?
I think that it's just Whitman and Abington, and then we have other small users. For example, I think the Family Dollar in West Bridgewater. So that's just like a sort of just a single, you know, not necessarily with a town, but it's just Abington and Whitman.
Oh, okay. And then I guess one is just a, let's call it a, regarding the system itself. Larry, what is the East Side Interceptor? What is that?
That's just another name for a transmission main. East Side Interceptor goes into the Beaver Brook on Thatcher Street. We have a small pumping station there, and then it pumps it right over to the plant.
So
and they tie right into that.
That's where they pump into the East Side Interceptor, and that then pumps it into our...
Yes, they go through that.
Okay. And where is that located, you said?
On Thatcher Street, right
Okay.
near, right next to the junkyard there.
Okay. Okay.
We have a small pumping station there.
Okay. Understood.
Because they pump to there, and then that goes through like South Street, and then it goes across the old landfill, right into the AWRF.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Okay, any other councilors have any questions before we go second? Councilor Castro.
Thank you. I have a question on, let's see, on page 4, we're talking about obligations and responsibilities, and it talks about how the characteristics of the waste transported from Whitman to the wastewater to sewer treatment plant conforms to the EPA and the DEP and such and all that. Well, what if it doesn't? Further in here, let's see, on page 5, it talks about Whitman has no responsibility for regulatory costs, expenses, or penalties incurred by Brockton as a result of Brockton's failure to comply with federal, state, and local laws. So what if Whitman puts something really bad in the system? Are we on the hook?
No, we're not at all. And right now, Council, they have to do, they have to replace a lot of their pipe because they've been having problems, and they're mandated by DEP.
So DEP is making them replace their pipes?
Yes, they are, yes.
Okay. And what about this part about, but they won't be responsible for any penalties we incur?
We will not be responsible.
No, it says Whitman has no responsibility for regulatory costs, expenses, or penalties incurred by Brockton as the result of Brockton's failure to comply with federal, state, or local laws, regs, or ordinances.
That's if the city of Brockton falls out of compliance with DEP. we don't have, Abington will not have to share that cost with us.
Okay. But couldn't we fall out of compliance because of something that Whitman dumps in the water, in the sewer?
No, no. Sewerage is sewerage. Like I said, they've had a few problems with ruptured mains in the Alger Street area, so DEP come down on them. So,
Okay. And also,
it wouldn't fall on us at all.
pardon?
It wouldn't fall on us at all if they're out of compliance.
Okay.
DEP would put them into compliance.
Okay. Page 2 of 16 talks about, references exhibits A through F, but there are no exhibits on this agreement. Is it possible, can you email them to us so we can have a look?
Sure,
If we really want to?
sure, we'll get the whole.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Farwell.
All right, two quick things. Colleagues, something like this should have gone to our legislative council. You know, with all due respect, and I'm not taking anything away from the solicitor, that's why we have legislative counsel. She should have been given this document. She could have compared the old IMA with the new IMA and at least given us a synopsis of any changes. I want to go to just one page in here, and it's section 1.2, which I think has been mentioned before, and it's about 2/3 of the way down, and it begins with, notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained within this paragraph 1.2, the parties hereby agree that the outstanding balance is due from Whitman for fiscal year 2016 in the amount of $101,467.91, fiscal year 2017, $84,203.35, fiscal year 18, $89,839.28, and fiscal year 2019, $805,578.40. Why do we let them get away with that? We don't even do that for our own residents. Why would a municipality, and by the way, this is not on you, Mayor Sullivan, because you weren't mayor in fiscal year 2019. Why would we do that? And let's make sure something's in this agreement that doesn't happen again. Because if we're going to charge our residents, as we should, for failure to pay their water and sewer bills and charge them interest, then you know what? The town of Whitman should be treated no better and no less. And that really irritates me. So I don't even ask you to comment because that's not on your watch. But that's in this document, and that should be a rallying call to all of us to make sure that we monitor that Whitman pays their invoices in a timely manner, and that doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Madam President, with all due respect, when I file this, because I do it, I walk down and do it, it goes to the city clerk. Shannon Resnick doesn't work for me. She has nothing to do with me. So if you want to direct my office, Kerry, or myself, or Danielle, to tell the clerk's office to give it to Shannon Resnick, I'm happy to do that. Happy to do that. I worked with her for 10 years. But she doesn't work for the mayor.
No, Mr. Mayor, that was a criticism of us. I mean, one of us, including me, should have picked up the phone and called the council president and said, hey, you know what? I'm not an attorney, and I know nothing about the old IMA. Now we've got a new one. So would you coordinate, and they have a great working relationship, would you coordinate with Solicitor Bridges and tell us, here's what's in the old agreement, here's what's in the new agreement, here's how it's going to affect the city and its residents. So if you thought that was aimed at you, it was not.
No, I'm just saying, I'm happy to do that. You hit it on the head, Counselor. Attorney Bridges and Attorney Resnick have a great working relationship, as do all the other attorneys here at City Hall. So I don't know if the solicitor had any additional info.
Sure, just a couple points, and just, and I'm happy to provide any clarification that you need on it. So maybe we should just take a quick step back. So the biggest difference in this agreement and what is currently governing the parties right now is the way the flow is calculated. So right now, the cap is 1 million gallons a day, 365 gallons a year. And we basically look at it in a, not a day-by-day basis. We don't penalize them for a daily overage unless it's a consistent daily overage. The penalty is provided for in here. So Councilor Cruz, to your point, it's not what's coming into our system every day. They can send us 1 million gallons, up to 365 million gallons a year, and we expect them to use that amount. So there's no capacity increase in this agreement, same capacity. But as you can see from page 1, we're getting more money. They've been negotiating with us on changing the way that we calculate how we're going to get paid for the processing of the sewerage. So now, because they don't use our systems, our traveling systems, they just use our processing, they use our plant, that's what they're paying for: operations, maintenance, capital improvement, costs. And to Councilor Farwell's concern, these folks have no monies that are outstanding and due with any interest due payable on them. Those monies, beginning with payments in fiscal year 16, are sort of what we've been able to capture based on this new formula. We don't have an agreement that's governing right now the costs of Whitman's use of our sewerage facility. So what this is getting for us an additional benefit that they're willing to pay, even though we had no agreement over those times. And so I don't really think that in this particular instance, these folks would be, have any interest or penalty due on them. They have been paying, and then the fiscal year 19, I'm not going to convolute the conversation by the billing, but I just understand that they're not billed at the same sort of time period like when our taxes go out. So it looks like 19 is delinquent, but if it is, that is the only delinquency. The $101,000, $84,000, $89,000, those are all additions to what they've already paid for those fiscal years. And those numbers are arrived at by this new formula.
So only fiscal year 2019, 805, 578.40, they're reserving the right to challenge that amount,
Yes, sir.
which means that that amount has not yet been paid.
Correct. That is yes, you're right.
Okay.
But my understanding of the billing is it's not yet delinquent, even though it says FY19 right there.
But what, just to clarify, if 2016, 17, and 18 is not outstanding, why would they agree to retroactively apply the provisions of the new agreement to those years and generate those amounts?
On an assumption, because I was not at that table in those negotiations, it would be because they're good faith actors on the other side of this agreement, that this was the amount that they've arrived at over years of negotiation, and that they're willing to subscribe themselves to this method of accounting.
Well, then let me apologize to the people of Whitman for 2016, 17, and 18, but please send the check for fiscal year 2019.
It's ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And just to your comment, Attorney Resnick receives the agenda. She was here last week at City Council, so she sees what's coming before us, and any counselor at any point can send her, she's always been very responsive, so if you want to send her the contract tonight, I'm sure, she'll be more than happy to look at it. My question before we go on is, who was at the final negotiating table? Do you know who was actually?
So on behalf of the city, Kate Federoff was the negotiator, and myself and the mayor had a meeting with her, I believe it was last week or the week prior, and we went over the agreement in detail. She explained to us what the changes were. Larry was at the meeting also, but she handled the negotiations.
So Kate Federoff?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councilor Lally, I know there are councilors that have already spoken that want to ask more questions, but Councilor Lally, you haven't had the floor yet, correct?
I have not. Thank you.
Yours.
I want to draw from Councilor Farwell and Councilor Thompson's remarks. I think, Councilor Thompson asked, and we got to the bottom of it with Councilor Farwell as well about, why we're seeing this money here. Wynn makes a very good point for the city in general. That's why we have the accounts committee and the auditor and things like that. We want to make sure that when money is due, we get it, especially when we're asking the same of our own residents. But from what I understand from this line of questioning and from the line of questioning earlier, we've sort of been without a new IMA since 2015. This is just payment. They're making up the difference. So we've negotiated a new IMA. They're paying more, and this reflects how much more a year they've been paying. But as just a matter of good faith, they have been paying us the last 5 years, or last 4, while we work that out. So really, if anything, Section 1.2 highlights the benefits to the city of Brockton that this new IMA shows. So I just have to say, to Larry, you, Troy, Mr. Mayor, good job, because this is quite an increase. But that's, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, because there's been some questioning on it this evening. That's what this is. This is just, they're retroactively, they're giving us the money because technically this contract, even though it's starting now, technically it started 5 years ago.
That's right.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Any councilors that haven't asked any questions? Oh, Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. Just one question I didn't ask. You alluded to it a second ago. What's the limit on how many gallons, actually, Larry, I might need you on this. So how many gallons do we contract with them? And even though it's not a day, we have a limit per day that you can take at the plant, correct?
Well, we have a limit per day that, the effluent that we can
That we can handle.
dump into the Salisbury, but this is 1 million. They didn't, I can tell you, all councilors, I was on a lot of this negotiating, and we did some negotiating in good faith to answer your question, Councilor Farwell, that we said the interest, as long as this is going, and they're gonna pay us back from day one to when we settle this, that's why that's there. But they did ask for another $500,000, and Jay Condon was within at least 2 years of it anyway. He was with us, and we said, well, you're gonna have to pay for it. And they said, no, we just want that extra luxury of the $500,000. We said, no, we're not gonna tie up a 500,000 gallons where we could give it to some other community. If you wanna pay for it, we'll tie it up. And so they said, no. It was a tough negotiation to go through. But to answer your question, 1 million, that's what they can send this way.
Okay, and they wanted more for the same amount of money, but what if they needed, is the whole town of Whitman on the system?
Yes.
Can they, and kind of this goes back to more like when we get into the water issues with Stonehill, can they add, I mean, that's the maximum they can send us. So if somebody came to them and wanted to build 1,000 units of housing, they can't send it to, they'd have to do something else. They can't add it to their system without coming to us and asking permission.
To reopen, correct.
Okay, and they'd have to reopen the agreement.
They'd have to they'd have to renegotiate with us, yes.
Now, what physically happens if they have more than that? I mean, appreciably more.
If they do it and, well.
Yeah, let's say all of a sudden it was,
It's metered, there's a flume that it goes into that, it's our meter, we can watch how much they're sending our way, but they also have a meter too. Now, I believe Megan can help me with, but there's penalties in there. If they constantly go over the million, we can penalize them.
we can penalize them?
Yes.
Okay,
That, I know that's in the contract somewhere.
okay. Thank you.
All set, Counselor? All set, Counselor Thompson? Okay. No other questions?
Motion to recommend favorable.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 12.
Ordered that the naming of Brookfield Drive also be known as Zuckerman Way in dedication of Ray Zuckerman. Invited, Bobby Zuckerman.
Good evening, Mr. Zuckerman.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Thank you for waiting patiently. I know we have a pretty big agenda this evening, but welcome.
Thanks for having me. It was pretty exciting. I've never been to a meeting like this, and it was pretty interesting listening to everything going on. My name is Bobby Zuckerman. I'm here on behalf of my mother, Ray Zuckerman. She's been a resident on 18 Brookfield Drive for the past 62 years. My mother is a hero. My mother read an article in the Brockton Enterprise one night, and it was an article about a kid who got in a car accident, and he was paralyzed. And he's a resident of Brockton, and he was a shut-in. and he had nothing to do anymore, and he was lonely. And my mother said, there's got to be other people like him that are lonely, that are stuck in the house, that are physically disabled. Now, there's nobody physically disabled in my family. We don't, never known anybody that's been physically disabled where they're stuck in a wheelchair or paralyzed. We don't know anyone in our family. But my mother, when she read this article, she said, I got to do something. So my mother founded an organization here in Brockton 37 years ago called Living Independently for Equality, the Life Handicap Center. It's the only one like it in the state of Massachusetts. It's a place for Brockton residents to go that are physically disabled, that would normally be shut-ins and have nowhere to go. It's held in the community room at 54 Haverhill Street. 3 to 4 days a week. It opens at 8:30 in the morning, and physically disabled residents are driven there by dial-a-bat. They serve them a basic breakfast, like coffee and donuts and stuff like that. Not a hot breakfast. But at lunch, they give them lunch. Tuesdays, they take them wheelchair bowling at Westgate Lanes. Every other Wednesday night, they go out to a different restaurant, and it's all transportation by dial-a-bat. It's incredible to see these group of people that are all in wheelchairs and different things, and she'll have entertainment come, and they're wheeling around, and they're motivated, and they're dancing, and it's absolutely incredible. For what she did, she organized and she founded a nonprofit organization. She was recognized by the City of Brockton many years ago. They don't have a program anymore like this. It was called the Champion of the City. My mother was the very first champion of the City of Brockton, 37 years ago. Her and another gentleman were tied for first place. His name is Arthur Paquin. There's been a street named after him for the past 25, 30 years now. It's called Arthur Paquin Way. For what my mother was recognized by the city, it was a big thing. You folks allowed her to be on a float as the city's champion and wave to people, her and my dad, going down Main Street. Because of what she founded and what she accomplished in Brockton, my mother was named one of People's Magazine's 50 American Heroes. She was flown to Washington and pinned by Barbara Bush for what she's accomplished in the city of Brockton. They had 50 American heroes, one from each state, for what they've done in their community. And they picked my mother. They flew her to Washington, and she was pinned by Barbara Bush. And my mother said to Barbara Bush, "Mrs. Bush, it's such an honor to meet you." And Barbara Bush looked at my mother and said, "No, honey, it's an honor to meet you." My mother is really a hero, in my eyes anyway. She deserves Brookfield School, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little nervous. She deserves Brookfield Drive to be dedicated to her. I'm not asking for the street name to be changed. Jack Valley, I want to thank you personally for helping me through everything to get to where I am now. Jack personally went around to all my neighbors, and he wrote up a letter, and he walked door to door and put one on everybody's door saying what I was trying to do. And if anybody if they were for or against it, they could email him. There were no againsts. He got about 8 emails in favor of. And he let them know that I was going to follow up with a letter for those of my neighbors that don't know my mother. Because like I say, I think she's been on, there's about 30 houses on Brookfield Drive. And I'm pretty sure there's only one other family that's been there as long as my parents. And I followed, I'll make this real quick. I wrote, "In regards to the letter that you received from City Councilor Jack Lally, the City of Brockton is considering dedicating Brookfield Drive to my mother, Ray Zuckerman, in recognition for all she has done to help the physically disabled Brockton residents over the years. Ray has been a resident of 18 Brookfield Drive for the past 62 years. 37 years ago, she founded Brockton's Life Handicap Center, for which is still in existence today. For that, she was named the very first champion of the city. This action would not affect your mailing address or anything of that nature. The only thing that would change would be an addition of a sign or a plaque placed next to or above the existing street sign. This is an honor that truly does deserve, this is an honor she truly does deserve for her dedication for helping others in the city. I ask that you please respond to Jack Lally's letter with your support. I ask City Council for your support. I love my mother a lot. She's 85 years old now. She was about 48 years old when she founded this center, and it's still in existence. She's at the beginning of dementia. She asked me, she took a fall in the house recently, and she's at the Bay Point across from the Westgate Mall for rehab. And her first 14 days, she's in quarantine. That's tough for an 85-year-old lady to be in quarantine. Her memory is starting to go. I'd really like this to be in honor of as opposed to in memory of. So many things are done for people after they die and they don't even know. Lenny Zakem, the bridge was named after him. My mother's handicap center, they usually donate, they rely on grants. The Lenny Zakem Fund usually donates at least $10,000 a year. The Howard House, they donate like $10,000. My mother's center has in its bank over $100,000 right now to be able to do things. When they take them on trips, they have to rent a bus for a day, and it has to be a bus that supports handicapped people. And it's like $800 a day just to rent a bus to go on a day trip. They've accomplished a lot. They've done a lot for a lot of Brockton residents that are physically disabled. And I hope you find in favor of this. My mother's really well deserving.
Well, thank you, Bobby, and you make your mom proud. I mean, I'm glad we got to hear her story and hear it through you. And I know that Councilor Lally has a few words to say. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, I don't think I can say anything better than you can. I do just want to note, I did go door to door. There are exactly 30 houses on Brookfield Drive. I left a letter for each of them, spoke with a good number of them, and I think it's a testimony to our neighborhoods, especially in our area. A lot of the neighbors did know your mother and knew the family and knew little Bobby. You know, a couple of people asked me little Bobby. Yeah. So I think it speaks very well to to our whole neighborhoods. But these people were all for it. They had some very kind things to say. And I think it's been very clear, and I feel like I've learned a lot about how many lives Mrs. Zuckerman has touched since this process has started. I think that, on a bit of a tangent, Mr. Mayor, I think it would behoove the city, in an attempt to encourage more action like this, to look at reviving that program, or looking into something similar. Put your own spin on it. But it's a shame to see things like this have gone by the wayside. But councilors, I ask for your support on this matter. I think that Mrs. Zuckerman, she's a pretty good case as someone who has done a lot for the city of Brockton and its residents, and who deserves such recognition from the city. So I'll yield the floor for anyone with any other questions, but if there are none, I would move to recommend this favorably.
Councilor Cruz has
I'll second the motion, and on the motion, just to speak for a minute, Bobby called this week, and I remember very well, his mother reached out and worked very closely with my cousin, the late Senator Tom Kennedy, on this, and she was relentless. And not having anybody in the situation that somebody like my cousin Tom was, it was amazing. The work she did, the passion she brought to the project, and they worked together to find originally it was up at the Westgate Mall, the Life Center that she worked so hard for, and Tom helped her get this open, and he loved your mother, so and I agree completely. In honor of is much better than in memory of, so.
Absolutely.
That's why I do second the motion, and thank you, and
Thank you.
tell her we were asking for her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. A motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full City Council. So this will go back on next week's agenda, Bobby. Thank you again for being here, being patient, and I always say the City of Brockton has amazing residents, and I love hearing their stories, and they're all heroes. So we look forward to actually meeting your mom. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And if I could just have 10 more seconds.
Sure.
If this does get approved, I don't remember whether it was Tim or Wynn. I asked, if this does get approved, how long of a process does it take? Because while she's in this, I've noticed her memory starting to fit, and I was told it could take 2 to 3 months till something is erected.
I think
It's
Councilor
times-
Lally can answer, but I think it's pretty,
What would happen is the City of Brockton would need to order a sign,
Yep.
and then
there we go.
2 weeks or less? Okay, yeah, basically, what would happen is it would go over to the DPW and the executive branch for them to order the sign and plan some kind of small ceremony, COVID
Fantastic.
appropriate. So I will look forward to hearing from the mayor's office about planning this event. I stand ready to help in any way possible, and I will communicate anything with you, Mr. Zuckerman, assuming that you're not already looped into the planning.
I appreciate everybody's time, and
I have to say, you take after your mom. You're just as relentless, because I know we're dealing with COVID in the summer, but you make her proud. I know you fought hard to be here this evening. I know you had a lot going on, but you made sure you found out how the process and to make sure to honor your mom. So we appreciate that. So
thanks.
thank
I
you.
won't take any more of your time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
evening.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, number
13.
13.
Resolve, whereas the city is currently evaluating plans for new public safety facilities, including a potential combined fire, police, and emergency management facility at a location to be determined. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the mayor, chief financial officer, and such other individuals as the mayor may determine to be appropriate, be invited to a finance committee meeting on September 21st, 2020, in order to provide information to the city council on the current progress of the public safety facilities project. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Sean Schmiegel, KBA Architects, Joe Sullivan, CHA.
Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor. I know I had a conversation with our CFO, and he wanted to do a small presentation beforehand just about our overall financial overview about some of the plans in the future. I don't know if you want to present that, or if Mr. Clarkson, or...
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just wanted to, if we go back in time, pre-COVID, January 6th, when I took the oath, as we all took the oath that day, I stated from that podium right there that we need to have a modern facility for our police and fire. We need to do it. Our brave men and women are in stations at Thomas Edison, literally fired up. That Sacco and Vanzetti were arrested and jailed. I mean, that's just a fact. So I want to thank the council president and council at large. They serve on the task force. We do it on a weekly basis. We have department heads. We have Deputy Chief Nardelli, Chris LaFrance from the police. We have our architects here, our consultant, Joe Sullivan's here as well. But at the end of the day, it's going to cost a lot of money. That's a fact, but we have to spend it to make sure that we can modernize the facility, have a campus-like setting that's going to be beautiful, but also really done in a manner that's going to address all the needs of police and fire. So recently I asked to have the representatives from 144, Bill Hill, President of the Union, has joined the task force as well, and also Brian Maker and Derek Solomon from the police unions, patrolmen and supervisors, so they can opine their thoughts as well. So it's a collective effort. Tonight is really one step of many, many steps. We have not found the exact location yet. There's a lot of locations kicking around. I know where I want it. I think Mayor Rodriguez shared the same view, and I think Mayor Farwell does as well. But at the end of the day, this is something that needs to be done. It needs to be done in a manner that's going to be really a less of a tax burden on our taxpayers, all of us and the people we serve. So that's why Troy's going to be able to give us a breakdown of debt. Our Hilltop advisor has told us that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity right now. Going to have a gap period. We're going to be able to borrow money and get some really good businesses done here in the city of Brockton. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief. What I wanted to do, well, let me first say, when the mayor took office and when the city council president took the gavel, they both pledged that we would work with you to share information readily and to try to be prospective and to look into the future and plan and really engage the council and the public in decisions before they were proposed to happen. So my brief presentation to you tonight is in that spirit as committed to you by the mayor, so that we can begin to have discussions now about actions that we will ask you to take 6 months or a year from now. But it's really important, I think, to put this project that you're about to hear about in perspective, because the planning for the public safety complex is not happening in a vacuum. We also have a statement of interest with the Mass School Building Authority for a significant renovation of our high school, and that project could cost as much as $350 million. At the same 80-20 rate that we heard about earlier tonight, our share could be $70 or $75 million. We have millions of other dollars in proposed projects for, let's just say, the restoration and renovation of this building, the renovations to the stadium and conference center that the mayor has talked about, the construction of an animal control facility that you've authorized funds to design, and on and on and on. So the city has significant capital needs. And so the major question as we embark on the planning for these projects is, how are we going to pay for them? So what I'd like to do tonight is really begin a dialogue with you to answer that question. And this has long-term consequences, but I think if we start talking about it now, we together can inform and engage the public so that they understand the decisions that we're asking you to make in the coming months and years are fiscally responsible ones. So, and this thing can be a little temperamental, so forgive me as I try to manage it here. There we go. So, if you think of our debt service as a constant, and it's not, but I'm trying to provide a baseline for our discussions. So, right now, we spend roughly around $13 million a year in our budget for principal and interest payments on our debt. And so, solely for purposes of demonstration, I've taken that amount, that $13 million, and carried it as a constant over the next 30 or so years to 2050. And so, that is not an actual representation of our debt. What it is a baseline. So if we said as a policy, we wanted to keep our principal and interest spending on debt constant over the next 30 years, we would draw that line as a guideline to try to evaluate ourselves to see how we're doing. What that blue line represents is an actual reflection of what our principal and interest payments are over the next 20 years. And so as you can see, that says existing general fund debt with POB. The POB is the pension obligation bond that some of you will remember, and the city about 15 years ago took out borrowed money to address its ongoing liability for its pensions. And so that is all of the city's existing debt, including the pension obligation bond. If you can see over the next few years, because that bond was backloaded, so the payments are higher at the end of it than they were at the beginning. So over the next few years, our principal and interest payments on an annual basis will climb slightly, but then you can see a precipitous drop, a cliff. What I also call, though, a window of opportunity, because you can see from fiscal 28 to 29, our annual spending on principal and interest goes from approximately $16 million down to $2 million. Now, if this were your home mortgage, right, you could, essentially when the mortgage is almost paid off, you can either let it go and just pay less, or if your home needed some repairs, you needed to invest some money into it to bring it up to date, you could borrow more money and keep your payments constant so that you're investing in your property, but not burdening your personal budget anymore. Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to demonstrate tonight. We have an incredible, and I'm not exaggerating when I say to you, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to invest in this city and not increase the burden on our taxpayers. Because here is, oops, come on. There we go. Now, what that orange line represents is if we go out in the very near future and borrow $150 million. This has been developed, obviously not just by me. We are in constant contact with the folks at Hilltop Securities, who are our debt advisors. Some of you may know Cinder McInerney, who's been the advisor to Brockton for a very long time. I've had the pleasure of working with her company in other municipalities where I've worked. And so this is the result of our collaboration. And what this represents is what it would look like if we went out and borrowed $150 million. Just for purposes of our discussion tonight, that means $75 million for a public safety complex and $75 million to renovate the high school. Now, you will see that those annual costs would increase over the next few years because what we would do is we would recommend that we borrow that money sooner rather than later to take advantage of these historically low interest rates. In fact, it's not on here, but I can tell you, for instance, we looked at what our cost would be if we borrowed $150 million at 2.25%, which is how this is reflected, versus 4.5%, which is a more traditional interest rate for municipal debt. The difference between those two figures over the life of the loan is $70 million. $70 million in savings if we move forward and borrow the money sooner while the rates are low versus waiting when they may go up. We don't know. But that's certainly, I think, one way to look at it and one way to accommodate. Now, we would have to figure out a way to accommodate with our operating budget those increased costs over the next few years. But again, tonight we're starting the discussion and really trying to give you some things to think about. So that's, that shading represents that $150 million and how we would fill in that window of opportunity if we went ahead and borrowed that money for those two major projects. But look at what you see within the yellow line, so keeping our principal and interest payments constant on an annual basis, we can still keep our payments the same and have additional opportunity to fill in additional debt. And so, there we go. The orange shaded area represents other opportunities for some of those other projects that I've talked about. And you know we've been working on the city's first ever 6-year capital plan, and in there some tens of millions of dollars in projects in addition to these two. So renovations of your fire stations, what I talked about before, fixing this building, and a whole host of other capital needs that have been delayed. But now that we have this opportunity, it's important to, I think, to start talking about those because we can responsibly, in a very fiscally responsible manner, address some of the needs that have been deferred for many, many years and look your constituents straight in the eye and say, we're going to invest in our city, but not increase the overall costs. That's an historic opportunity, and so that at this point is the end of the presentation. Again, just designed to start the dialogue so that together we have the opportunity to look to the future, and as people say to you in the street, well, you want to build a new high school and this public safety complex, but how are we going to pay for it? Here's your answer. So we can start to begin to have that dialogue so you can have those conversations with your constituents as we begin to, the significant task of designing these projects and moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you, Madam Chairman, for allowing me to make that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. CFO. Any question? Councilor Cruz.
Well, first, Troy, thank you, just because it's so small. So what year is the large drop-off that we'll have, so that means we'll have paid back the bond for the pensions?
Right.
And what year is that? I can't.
2028.
So you're proposing borrowing the money now, because we would save, and obviously, but the two projects are both probably 3 to 4 years away.
Well, we discussed that actually in our call last week with Hilltop. I would say construction of those projects, yes, but we will incur cost for those projects in the very near future for both. I mean, I think you'll hear tonight about the public safety complex, that it's in the planning stage, but within a fairly short amount of time, we will incur actual probably design architectural costs should the project move forward. So, and I'll be straight with you, as I always am. If we borrow the money now and wait a few years for construction, there will be what's known as arbitrage costs to the city. That means, because you can't borrow public money and then make money off the money you borrowed.
Well, so, exactly. That was my question. Can we? I mean.
So I raised that question knowing about, obviously, being around for quite a long time. And the answer is that I got from Hilltop, and we can bring them in some night as well, was yes, and it would, because of the incredible savings by the interest rate, right, that it makes sense to borrow the money now, even if you incur penalty costs, because the savings in the interest rate is so great, it makes it worthwhile. That's presuming interest rates at some point go back up.
Right, well, none of us can know that.
Right.
So in other words, we would borrow it and basically just put it in the bank for now. And, I mean, obviously, some of it we would start using, but, so we can do that legally?
Yes. That question was specifically asked because in municipal finance speak, arbitrage is a bad word. But if we go into the process,
Well, because theoretically, you're paying for nothing.
If we go in eyes wide open, understanding that those penalties are part of the overall financing picture, then it's not a bad word. It's part of our opportunity.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Thompson.
Hi, Troy. Good evening. Just a quick question. Is there any comparable program for public safety buildings as there is for the MSBA for our school buildings? So this is going to come all out of our pocket, and there's no other program that helps fund any public safety buildings or anything like that?
I mean, there may be some, there is no comparable agency that funds public safety projects. Are there grant funds out there that could help defray some of the equipment costs and energy efficiency? Absolutely. But in terms of an overall program that defrays 80% of the costs, if there's one, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Understood.
The legislature could certainly create one.
We'd like that, yes. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors have any questions for Councilor Iannieri?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I know we're talking a public safety building here, which I'm 100% for, because I think it's been overdue, to be truthful with you, and I think we need to be doing something there. And I understand, you know, the situation we also have with Brockton High School. There's no doubt there needs to be something done there. I attended that school myself for 2 years, so it definitely needs some work and other things done to it. I just want to, the mayor is here, and I know you had mentioned just early on, not if we could just step aside for just a couple of seconds, but, you know, the stadium and the conference center, I have, you know, would like to see what we're going to be able to do with that at some point. We've got to begin to do something there. But the other thing I see that we don't mention a lot of, and I think we've overseen over the last few years of not, you know, trying to do anything with, but we need to do something, and I'm glad you're here, Mr. Mayor, because I know we worked at, when we were here on the council together, and we need to start to take a look at these vacant school buildings that are just sitting here. I mean, we got, I think, what's there, 4, the Howard, the Shaw, Whitman. Do I want to call it the Lincoln? I think it's the Lincoln, right? And I thought at one point there was going to be a project done there.
That is under agreement, Counselor. What's Rob Coley at, what's that? NeighborWorks has that under agreement. That was an RFP that was out. I think it was under Mayor Carpenter.
Yeah.
I
Right.
took a tour of the Whitman School, the school that I went to, and Council Farwell went to, and much like why we just spoke about the Huntington School,
Right.
the roof there leaks, and it's really created probably a non-developable building now.
Right,
It's just,
right.
it's mold and it's disgusting. I will just let you know about the Shaw Center, because that's something that we talked about as well in January, right? We want a showpiece, we want to be able to keep business here in the city of Brockton. Originally, Mike Thomas, superintendent, and I, when this was an idea to try to do, when we thought that we'd be able to be back in school, the boys and girls would be in the classrooms, that would be able to use the CARES Act funds, because we'd be able to use the Shaw Center as an annex learning center from the Brockton High students. Subsequently, that's not going to come to fruition for many reasons. However, step 2 of this, and I took a tour the other day, Sue Joss in Brockton Neighborhood Health Center has been doing yeoman's hours outside at Brockton High School doing testing. And now with Stop the Spread testing, it's enhanced testing, right? We're doing it at Massasoit, we're doing it at the Housing Authority. But Sue and her team have been outside. Well, October's coming quick and it's gonna get cold.
Right.
So the thought was, could we take the folks from Neighborhood Health Center, bring them into the Shaw Center so they could do indoor testing? And that's a legitimate CARES Act reimbursement expense. So we would be able to earmark it, get it rehabbed. The Amoresco's already teed it up. They'd be able to get it done by December. Sue and myself and her team took a tour the other day. They're trying to see if DPH will allow the license to go from outside to inside. If that's the case, Counselor, I'm going to give it the thumbs up and let's go for it for many reasons, because we know the testing's going to go into the spring and summer months as well.
Exactly.
And they've been a great partner. They've been a great partner.
No, that only makes sense, Mayor, it really does. No, they shouldn't be outside, they should be inside.
Yeah, it's
No.
going to be getting freezing soon.
My other concern, as you know, is the stadium itself and those locker rooms and those areas there. I don't care what anybody says, and you know you've been through them as well. I mean, they're in deplorable condition. I mean, for him to even think that he wanted to have his baseball up there, and it just didn't make sense to me. Just going back to the school buildings, I mean, at this point, those buildings are really deteriorated themselves. I mean, they'd have to come down. I mean, all you're going to do now is put an RFP if you can and try to sell the properties, and if we can make $1 million for total, I mean, we've got to do something with them because they're just sitting there, and I'm sure there's a lot of storage in there that's moldy, mildewed, and everything as well.
Well, we took a tour, Councilor Cardoza and myself and the superintendent took a tour recently at the Goddard School, right?
Right.
Because the thought is, can we make that a community center, right? And I want to thank Tina for banging the drum on that. Unfortunately, this week, I had Dr. Jim Cobbs, who was here earlier, Jamie Domestico, Ken Thompson, Aldo Petronio, and Jim Plouffe from City Side go in there. Cheapest amount to get that up to speed would be $1 million. It has no elevator, substantial money. Now, if what we just saw from the CFO rings true and we're able to amortize some money, it's going to, it's going to be money well spent. But I'm happy to bring, I think Senator McInerney should come before you. I think it would be great to hear directly from her. Many of you know her. But Joe Sullivan, who's no relation to me, although some say all the Sullivans are related, Joe is here tonight. He's the consultant on the public safety building. He is spearheading this. He has a lot of institutional knowledge that he can share tonight as well. But as I said, and again, the council president and council at large are on the call. This is going to be many steps, because this is a partnership, legislative and executive. At the end of the day, we all have the same common purpose to have the best public safety facility in the city of Brockton, really. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are you all set, Counselor?
Mr. Mayor, just before you sit down,
Is this regarding the, I know why our invited guests have been waiting for a
it's just
long
one other
time.
comment. I just want to go back to the mayor with the guarded school.
Yes, sir.
The finish should be worn off on that by now, right?
It's getting there.
It's getting there. The guarded school, I just want to go back to the grounds. They need to be taken care of. I think you and I even discussed that one other time, too. It's not my ward, but still, it's deplorable, and there's a fence that's laying down there that doesn't need to be there. I just think we need to just address that up if we could. I know you've got many things to do, but
Nope, you bring a good
if
point.
you
and
can just make a mention of it.
Mr. and the superintendent this morning, we have a weekly meeting.
All right.
We actually talked about that because we wanted to vet out the $1 million price tag, which is kind of eye-opening, but I hear you, and it will be
I
addressed
would
tomorrow.
appreciate it. Well, in the best interest of all of us, really. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lally, is the question regarding this resolved? Counselor, go ahead.
All right. Thank you for the update, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, thank you.
You know, I'd be a little remiss if we made these fine folks wait here all evening. If anyone has anything to say or to talk about the project, I'd, love to hear from them. I know there are a lot of people in our public safety fields that are wondering, they're looking for some concrete details. What do you, what might be seen? What's on the brain? And so I wanted to throw that to you, obviously, but also if anyone has anything they want to add to the project.
I believe there's a presentation, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the
Mayor?
only thing I wanted to just share is that police and fire, I also would like IT to leave Brockton High and go there, because they create the IT for public safety, so it only makes sense to get them out of the core building of Brockton High and bring them there. And also Steve Hook and Brockton Emergency Management, who's done unbelievable during COVID, take them out of the war memorial and put them there. There was some initial discussions about animal control. Should they leave Court Street and come there? I think we're going to invest money on Court Street, right? That's our asset. But you're right, Council President. I mean, these folks have the knowledge, and they've been here a long time. So thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Farwell, do you want to?
Well, just to move this along, because I filed a resolve, I'd like Mr. Sullivan and his team to come up either one at a time or together, and I do thank them for waiting 3 hours and 15 minutes. Tonight, I think it's important for you to hear the very focused, thorough, methodical approach that's taken by this group to put together plans for a public safety campus and a project, and with that, we'll have them take over.
Thank you, Counselor. Good evening, Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you,
We
Madam
appreciate it.
President. My name's Joe Sullivan from CHA, and thank you all for having us tonight. I know you had a large agenda, but I think this is a very important project for the town, for City of Brockton. There's a few things that I wanted to really stress to the City of Brockton. Public safety is probably one of the biggest entities that gets deferred. I mean, most of the product, most of their facilities, most of their dynamics are always put on the back burner, but they're the first at every scene. One of the things that we were hired for as your OPM, we're your, obviously, your right arm to make sure this project gets done appropriately. We make sure that the details are met. We went through a clear, methodical process of putting an RFS out for an architect to not only solicit an architect, but one of the better architects to provide the best public safety for the City of Brockton. And so, working with the city, we put a solicitation out. We hired Castle Booth's architectural firm, and they're known for their public safety buildings. In public safety, there's big variation between fire and police, but having the knowledge of knowing both of those facilities and trying to work a public safety building as in its entirety, we work through each process in a independent manner. And I'd like Todd Costa from KBA, just to explain some of those processes, and then we'll answer some of the questions, and then I'm going to go through the process that we'll be doing over the next 8 to 12 months. So,
Thank you.
Todd.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe had
If you
said.
don't mind, if you can just come closer to the microphone so people at home can hear you.
Sure. As Joe said, I'm Todd Costa from Casabusa Associates. I'm the co-principal in charge of providing the services, or our services, to the City of Brockton. Casabusa has been doing public safety since '63 when we were founded. So to say that we are been doing this for a while is an understatement. I personally haven't been doing it that long, but that is our company background. So just to kind of give you a brief synopsis, I'll run through. We've met with each of the departments as listed: IT, emergency management, police, and fire. Formed 4 independent programs, and then using our background and our knowledge of what other cities and communities have done, looked for synergies between those programs in order to consolidate that. What that does is that gives us kind of a recipe, if you would, of spaces and building size that we can now take that along with some of the parking and site requirements and look for a site that's going to work for either a combined facility, both or all 4 departments being combined into one building, or a campus scenario. And we're in the process right now of looking between 7 to 8 different sites throughout the city to see what can fit with that program as we've kind of established, and how to divide those up if they need to divide into separate sites.
Sure. And so through this process, and it is a long process. I mean, we're not just making quick decisions. We're not trying to build this building too fast or too quickly that we're going to forget something along the way. You know, we've looked at private sites. We looked at any city-owned sites. We looked at sites that were unconventional or may not work. We looked at the response times that were related to this overall process. We looked at locations within the city that made the most sense for a central fire station and police station and emergency management, as well as the IT to go to. There's a lot of, like, even the technology portion of what we're trying to accomplish here needed to be evaluated. So as each decision is narrowed down, and there'll be criteria that'll throw out one site versus another. There's financial impacts. There's traffic studies that we're going to end up doing for each of these sites to ensure that the traffic flow and make sure that the communities are safe as we move forward through this. So, you know, it's my job is to manage it for the city. As basically I'm overseeing the architect, and then we actually get into when the construction starts, we actually put a full-time superintendent there just on behalf of the city to make sure that the building is built per the plans and specifications, and that all of the products, the fit out, all of that cost associated is detailed in a budget, and it's followed right to the penny. I've been doing it, project management for CHA, and it was Daedalus Projects that was acquired by CHA. We're about 13, we have engineers, so we're really detailed and we know how to do public safety buildings. One of the things that I can tell you over the last 18 years, I haven't had a project go over budget, and typically we file a project under budget by the time we're done with it. One of the things that you're very fortunate, and Troy had led it, is not only the interest rates are great. With this pandemic, a lot of the construction companies that shut down for a while, they're actually really hungry to get started up. So you're in a great bidding procurement right now where prices are coming in a lot better than they have been a year and a half ago when the market was crazy. So not only will you get, in my opinion, you're going to get a quality building and a design out of the architects, you're going to get a general contractor that'll be eager to build this size of a building in the city, which is south of Boston, which you're going to get even better productivity and interest in, and you're going to get a building that you're going to be proud of over the next 50 years. I can tell you that much. The construction portion, design is typically going to take about 12 to 18 months to get a good design out and have it ready, and that gets solidified through a lot of design checks. It goes through a multi-step process where it goes from conceptual to feasibility. Once a site selection is done, then it'll go into design development. From design development, it goes through
typically three cost estimates are done. Typically at design development, we do an updated one around 70, 75%, and then we do one just before it goes out to bid. So to make sure that we're on budget and we're all of the components related to that specification and plans are done appropriately. So at that point, it goes through a 4-week subcontractor bid. We pre-qualify on this size project. We would pre-qualify the subcontractors and the general contractors to ensure that you're not going to get a contractor or a subcontractor that's going to do substandard work on this building. We make sure that the quality of those contractors are elite and that you're going to get the best product possible. So that's the steps that we're in. As we narrow, just on a Reader's Digest version of where we are right now, we're really going through and identifying what the program needs are on each of those departments. Without that information, we can't come up with a square footage or criteria what is needed for the city. I mean, when I say ours, the fire department, the police department, the IT, and the energy management personnel have spoken. We've sat through 3-hour sessions just going over what the needs are for the first responders now versus what they got right now, and what's actually promoted for decon areas, you know, the safety portion of when they come out of a situation and how they're getting, you know, stripped down and cleaning their clothes and being able to contaminate all of their personal belongings. So there's a lot of detail going into it right now. We'll be presenting to you probably on several occasions as it evolves, and hopefully give you more and more information as it comes up. And if there's any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to the mayor. Rob May has been a great asset to the city for us, and ask the architect and the OPM any questions you might have.
Thank you. I know councilors have some questions. No? Councilor Cruz, followed by Councilor Rodriguez.
Yeah, some of the questions I have, I know that have to be kind of broad at this point because we're not there, but I guess, Todd, so you've done a lot of public safety buildings comparable to Brockton. What cities have you done? Comparable size?
Comparable size. So we completed New Britain, which was primarily a police department. That one unique thing there was they had a mercantile section of that building, or a lease out. We're actually currently working with the city of Quincy to get them their new public safety building. Just trying to remember everything off the top of my head. Beverly is in PD, is in construction at this point in time.
Actually, Quincy and New Britain's probably a good, in your opinion, and again, I know we're not locked into anywhere yet, and I guess my view on it is Brockton's geographically a pretty small city. We don't have a lot of pieces of property. So some of the decisions are going to be forced by those qualifications to, but in your opinion, is one building for the police and fire, or should they be together, or is it better to be separate? In a perfect world where if you had property and and again, maybe these are for the fire chief or the police chief, but what works better for police and fire? Should they be in the same building, or if you had a perfect world, should they be separate?
It's a great question. I've been doing this for 20 years, and specifically public safety. I think we've done majority of the public safeties that are in the Commonwealth, or maybe majority might be a little bit exaggerated, but we've done a fair portion.
But that's what you do.
Yes, and there are great efficiencies, both economically as well as operationally, to be recognized when you combine those, as well as what the city's doing, where we're combining emergency management all into the same building. Operational efficiencies for simply mechanical purposes. Operational efficiencies for basically personnel all being within the same building, and rather than driving across town, it's walking up a flight of stairs. Great opportunities exist. Geographically challenged, you know, some of the site constraints, if you would, of a city don't often lend itself to that. You have a very unique opportunity here where a few of the sites are lending themselves to being large enough that we can accommodate all 4 within one building.
So if you can, you think it's good to have it all under one roof, or a campus-style thing?
It is, yes.
So the volume, the amount of, I mean, it's one thing to do it in a small town where you might have 25 police officers. That's a different thing than where you have 200 police officers. And, I mean, obviously fire is different where it's going to be it's a headquarters, but it's not everybody. So it's a little different. You have, you know, comparable sized department, but they're spread out around the city. Because I can envision problems, or I can envision, like you say, there are efficiencies of scale just on the mechanicals, you know, power, light, you know, all that kind of thing. But the fact that they're doing 2 different kind of jobs, you don't see, you don't see that being a problem.
No, not typically.
Okay, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just trying to get a grasp on, and to do it with these 4, about how much, you know, you need 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, what do we need to be able to put it all on one piece of property?
So I'd like to just take a shot at that. So the parcels that the City of Brockton have, they're all different sizes as we look at them. But when you combine the facility, it's actually easier to go, you know, vertical than it is horizontal. Fire stations typically need more horizontal space just for the apparatus portion of those buildings. Where police have administration, they still have Sally Port they have to deal with, and some, you know, the processing portion of the police stations. But I think overall, you know, based on the program need and your square footage that they're coming up with, that's what's going to drive to what size parcel that you're actually going to require. And acquiring that parcel is going to be dynamic where, you know, you may go 3 levels or 4 levels or even 5 levels. So it's going to, your square footage or the postage stamp may change a little bit on that size parcel. So it's, you know, as their program really evolves, and it's the first pass of their
I know we're talking general right now.
Anywhere between, you know, it could be 3 to 6 acres, depending on what you need. You know what I mean?
Okay, because that's not too bad. And I get what you're saying, that police in particular can go up more than, you know, fire, I guess you could go 2 stories probably, but more of it is all on one floor, and, you know.
And I have done public safety buildings with police and fire, and with all due respect, when the chiefs get along, it's great. Because when police.
But we're talking a building for 50 years, you're gonna have a lot of different chiefs.
I tell you, these departments, just speaking with them, you know, I can tell it's gonna be a great project. And if we're able to get the building within, you know, a complex, it's the best way to go.
It is, okay. I mean, that's obviously not knowing, it's just, and again, I think some of those questions, I'm glad to hear that the 2 unions, or 3 unions are involved now, because they're the guys that are there every day.
Right.
And they're the ones that so far haven't sued us for working conditions, and we like to, that's why, and they could have. If you've walked, I'm sure you've walked the buildings.
Oh, yeah.
It's, you know, we're lucky where we are right now. Lucky that we.
One piece of information, so I've charged Joe to coordinate a cost analysis. So one scenario would be 1 building, including everything, right? And the floors will vary depending on the price scale. The other one is having freestanding campus setting on the same footprint, the same location, but different actual buildings. There might be an atrium that connects the 2 or not, but really it's going to come down to dollars and then how it's going to meet the needs of the respective departments.
Yeah, and that's my question. It's like anything. I wasn't even asking about the finances yet. It's really about the operations was where my question is for operationally, does it work to have them together? You know, and then we look at the, again, at this point, we're basically on wish list kind of ideas anyway, so operationally, do they work well together when they can be? And I don't mean the particular people, like you're saying, that these chiefs, I could pick you through the last 20 or 30 years, some chiefs that didn't get along so well too, so, you know, that changes over the course of the use of the building over the next 50 to 60 years, whatever we hope that, hopefully not 100 years like most of the buildings we're using in the city right now. But, so my question was less about finances at this point, as opposed to operationally. Do they work together for the public, not just the people that are using them, because they are serving the public? You know, is all of that activity not conducive to the public using the buildings, and the public uses the police, I guess, more than they don't come into a fire station unless they're lost, but nowadays you just use Waze or whatever, so you don't have to do that, so. So that's interesting to hear that you prefer to see them, or you think it does work together. And again, then we get into the finances of whether it works, whether we can afford to do that, or whether we have to split them, or, and again, I know that the fire chief mentioned, and again, you're looking, I know it runs and things like that, that he'd prefer to be on the west side of the train tracks. Maybe we're not gonna be able to do that, you know, because then we may have to look at some of the underpasses, which adds to the cost of what we're doing, so, and again, I know we're at that general stage, but those general questions that I've interested in, how does it work best, so, thank you for your information. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been staying off the microphone tonight because of sore throat, but hey, what are you going to do? I just have a comment and then a question. I know that Councilor Cruz mentioned that the unions are involved because they're in these buildings every day, but the bill will be paid by the taxpayers of this community. So I also want to make sure that the taxpayers have a voice in what goes on in this community. I know that the mayor mentioned that there's a couple councilors involved in it, but there's a large segment of this population that's usually excluded from all these processes. I mean, a clear example is what was done at the senior center just several years ago. That building is not a building conducive to a city. It belongs mostly in a place like an Avon or so, because the mentality in this city has always been, and I'm hearing this coin about building better versus building bigger. I disagree with that coinage in the sense, because this is a city. You know, it's not a little town somewhere, and we need to start resembling a city. And often when you see these buildings being put up, they look like buildings that belong in little towns, and then 2 or 3 years later, we're here again talking about expansion of those buildings. And that's the reason why I brought up the senior center. We're a city of 100,000 plus people, and you're building a building that probably houses 200 to 300 people, when you probably could use 10,000 people. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that we're building a public safety building or complex that I would hope would serve this community for 50, 60, 70 years, long after a lot of us have gone. So I would hope that we would take that into consideration and build it for possible expansion and growth. We have a tendency in this city to build things horizontally because we don't want to give the impression that we want to be known as a city. You know, we wanted to continue it as North Bridgewater, or whatever other little towns we can come up with, not realizing that this is a major city south of Boston. So I'm hoping that within the design process that we go through, we keep that in mind and design it as such that it actually looks like a city building. You know, not a gigantic courthouse that we have down the street here with 4 stories where it could have been 10 stories and resemble a city building, and taking down 4 city blocks. Right. So I'm hoping that with whatever designs you go in, and this is for the mayor to try to include some community folks that actually will be footing the bill, to have an idea what this thing is going to look like long beyond the rest of us, to actually have an input, because I know that elected officials and folks that work within the government will have one impression of how things should be, and the community will have it in a different way. And I think it's important for us to take the community into play as well, include a few people from the community into this whole process so that they can actually have a voice in the design pieces. And I'm not just talking about any community, I'm talking about the diversity within this community as well, that actually would look at a police station or a fire station and be able to feel comfortable going into those facilities. Right. And not, you know, make it so that it's comfortable and looks nice for the workers within the place, but the people that actually have to go in there and do business in those buildings feel comfortable in going in there. So that's what I'm actually hoping that we would do as we move forward, because often a lot of those individuals are kept out of that whole process. And it's been going on. I've been in the city for 40 plus years, and it's been going on like you wouldn't believe. You see the groundbreaking ceremonies that take place at the Bat Center. I remember that back in the 90s when it was coming up. You see the pictures of the people standing with the shovels in their hands. It doesn't look like the riders of those buses. So I want to make sure that when we do go forward with these bills that we are asking our taxpayers to pay later on, that they too have a voice in what goes on in these projects.
So, Council, you bring up, I support that 1,000%, 1,000%. I mean, we have to have community stakeholders in this. At the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that are going to pay it. It has to reflect what Brockton looks like, what Brockton is, the fabric of Brockton. So, what this initial due diligence period that we're doing, Deputy Chief Nardelli's here as well, is we are just trying to formulate a game plan. That's all it is right now. And then when we get it, a little more executed, we'll be back again anyhow. But at that point, much like what I said to Councilor Yaneri, where we're talking about a roof repair, on that, I forgot to say, I've also appointed 2 community members that live in Ward 3. So you have to do that, and if you're not, you shouldn't be doing the line of work that we're doing, because you're not doing it right for the right reasons for the constituents. So I'll pledge to you, I might not be the mayor by the time this comes to fruition, but as long as I'm here, I'm going to work in that way, Moses, without question.
All right, thank you.
And just to add to the mayor's comment, we typically will have public forums as well. So we try to invite the community into it to give their input to what the design and what the features of that building might have or might not have, or what they're looking for that we might not be including in it. One of the other things that your point was well taken is that not only are the firefighters and the police department personnel involved, and they need to meet their programs for all of their essential requirements to do their administrative work. The fire station and the police department have to be inviting to the public. They want to, the entranceway going there, it shouldn't feel like you're going somewhere where you shouldn't, you feel uncomfortable being there. And KBA, over the last, 10, 15 years that I've seen, most of their entranceways to each of the public safety buildings that I've been involved with them on are inviting. They articulate, a place where they can get help or they need assistance on it. So I can tell you, over the last 5 to 10 years, public forums are a great venue to get the comments back from the public that, aren't necessarily part of the committee portion of the discussions, but we hear their voices as we move forward with the project. So we will incorporate that portion of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. I just would like to recognize that Taisha is here in the audience, and she organizes a lot of the meetings, and these are large meetings that have been taking place on Zoom, so I commend you. It's tough because so many people are involved, but thank you. They've been well organized. Councilors, any other councilors have any questions? Nope. Well, I would just...
Second.
On the motion, I would just like to comment that the process, I was allowed to be part of the process as council president with Councilor Farwell, and choosing the architect was everything has been a process. We've gone through a rate. Mr. May has created sheets where we've rated different agencies, different companies. We've worked, there were presentations. So this has been a process. It wasn't just, nothing was taken lightheartedly or really quickly. It's been a process that started in January, and it's continued every week with Zoom meetings. I haven't been able to make all of them, but it's involved a lot of people. It's a large group of people that have worked on this. So it's exciting because when I toured, actually it was with you, Councilor Rodriguez, the first time I had a tour of Brockton Police, our police station, I was appalled, and I left there thinking, how are we ever going to get a building for our police officers? Because if I worked there, I don't know if I would go to work every day in that building. I was just appalled, and you were with me, and I believe Mr. Ollie Spears that day, and so I look forward to this. I look forward to having come to fruition. Hopefully it's in our time, because we want to be there. I want to be in that picture, and I hope you'll be there with us digging. Groundbreaking. But thank you, and once again, I think it's a process, and everybody's very professional. And thank you for the opportunity. I thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to be a part of the group. So thank you. So a motion was made and properly seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries favorably back to the full city council. Thank you, and thank you once again for being here, waiting till the end. Councilors, Councilor Cruz.
Just a reminder to the members of the ordinance committee, next Tuesday night, the 29th, at 6:30 in this chamber, we'll be having an ordinance meeting. Any other councilors that are interested, you have items on the agenda. Councilor Farwell, I know, does, and Councilor Cardoso. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to make a quick announcement that the Brockton Redevelopment Authority is holding a public meeting to discuss the Trout Brook redevelopment plan on Monday, September 28th, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. A PowerPoint presentation will be had to outline the Trout Brook Urban Renewal Plan. That will be followed by a question and answer portion. This will be a Zoom meeting, and the information for the Zoom link is on my ward councilor Facebook page, and also the Brockton Redevelopment website. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Farwell.
Yes, there will be a councilor at large meeting by remote this Friday from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It will be covered by BCA Live on Facebook, and citizens can type in questions, which will be answered, and they can submit them in advance to any one of us through our email, which is on the city's website. We would ask that you use questions in the subject line and get them into us hopefully by Thursday in case there's anything we have to research. So this Friday, 6:30 to 8, live on Facebook.
Thank you, Councilor. A Friday evening meeting? So it's on Friday night?
This Friday night, yes. Yeah, that worked best for all the other people, so.
Very good. So any other councilors have any moments of personal recognition? Nope. Then I will take this
Madam
moment.
Chair.
Oh, Councilor Lally. So I have to first, before we continue, say thank you to the building department. These partitions are beautiful, but I have to tell you that I can't see most of you, so I apologize. I know at one point you both raised your hand at the same time, but I only see shadows. So, but they are beautiful and they are nice, so the building department did a beautiful job. Councilor Lally.
That's all right, Madam Chair. I understand who the favorite is. No, I just wanted to wish all of the Brockton public school students well as they return to school. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week in our city council agenda, we took in a resolve to plan for the city council to talk about planning a professional development day. And I just want to make sure it wasn't on tonight's.
No, Councilor, because when I put together the agenda, I realized we had items that we're going to take.
Okay.
Can you imagine if it was on right now?
Right.
We would be here for another probably 2 hours. So
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure it's going to be on the next
it will be on.
Finance Committee agenda because we're shooting for an October 24th date.
We can have a conversation after the meeting, Councilor, but when in planning the agenda, once again, there were these items that were already, that were ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Any other councilors? Then for Ward 7, we have a community meeting that's coming up this Thursday, September 24th. It's regarding the Augusta Ave Estate subdivision. The meeting is at North Middle School, which is 108 Oak Street. The meeting starts at 7 p.m. We will be in the auditorium. Meeting is held in accordance with COVID-19 guidelines. That means that everybody has to have a mask. If you don't have a mask, you will be asked to leave. Or if you don't want to wear one, you will be asked to leave. And social distancing is a must. I have distributed flyers to all the abutters. You are an abutter to this subdivision if you live on Augusta Ave Extension, North Ash Street, Cross Ave, Angela Terrace, and Earl Street. All are welcome, but these are the abutting streets, and they have been notified. This is a community meeting. This doesn't have anything to do with the developer or the engineer. They will be presenting in front of planning at the beginning of next month. So this is a community meeting. I look forward to seeing everybody there. With no further business before us this evening, this meeting is adjourned.